Sometimes I don't question if I love people. I question if I'm loved the same way back. Not liked, not wanted when it's convenient, actually loved. The kind of love that chooses you even when it's inconvenient. Because attention is easy to get. Replies are easy, compliments are easy. Late night, I miss you texts are easy. But consistency is rare. And sometimes I sit there wondering, do they love me? Or do they just like how I make them feel? I show up fully, I remember details, I check in, I move intentionally. So when effort feels uneven, it doesn't make me angry. It makes me question everything. Am I asking for too much, or am I just asking the wrong person? You can be surrounded by people and still feel unloved, because love isn't about volume. It's about depth. It's about feeling chosen without begging, feeling secure without overthinking, feeling valued without performing. And when you don't feel that, you start shrinking. Sometimes the scariest thought isn't, what if they leave? It's, what if they're here but they don't love me deeply? Because half love is confusing. It keeps you around. It keeps you hopeful, but it never fully reassures you. And that's exhausting. I think a lot of us don't need more love. We need clearer love. Love that says what it means. Love that acts how it speaks. Love that doesn't leave room for constant doubt, because if I have to guess, it doesn't feel safe. And maybe the real shift isn't asking, am I loved? So I do, okay. Maybe it's asking, do I feel loved? Because love can exist, but if you don't feel it consistently, it won't heal you. It'll just confuse you. I don't want intense love. I don't want dramatic love. I want steady love. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get heavy. The kind that doesn't go quiet when reassurance is needed. The kind that doesn't make me earn my place. If I'm loved, I shouldn't have to decode it. I shouldn't have to overanalyze it. I shouldn't have to convince myself of it. Love shouldn't feel like a debate. It should feel like certainty. So am I loved? Maybe the better question is, am I staying in spaces where I consistently feel valued? Because real love doesn't make you question your worth. It reinforces it, and if I ever have to constantly wonder whether I'm loved, that might be my answer. I know hopeless romantic sounds naive to some people, like it means you don't understand how the world works, but that's not true. A hopeless romantic isn't someone who ignores reality. It's someone who sees it clearly and still chooses love anyway. It's knowing how badly love can hurt and still believing it's worth it. I don't believe in love because I think it's easy. I believe in it because I know how rare it is when it's real. Being a hopeless romantic means you don't just want someone, you want connection. You want the kind of love where attention doesn't wander, where effort isn't forced, where choosing each other feels natural, not strategic. You want late night talks that don't feel rushed, silence that feels comfortable, inside jokes no one else understands. You want to build a world with one person and let the rest fade into the background. And yeah, you know the risk. You know love can leave scars. You know it can change you. You know it can take pieces of you that don't come back the same. But being a hopeless romantic means you'd rather feel deeply than live safely. You don't want love that's casual. You don't want to act detached. You don't want to pretend you wouldn't be devastated to lose someone you care about. You want to care. You want to choose someone fully and mean it. No exits, no backups, no pretending you're less invested than you are. And that's what makes it hard sometimes, because the world rewards indifference. It praises being unbothered. It treats emotional distance like maturity. So when you show up soft, present, intentional, people call you too much, but you're not too much. You're just not built for shallow love. A hopeless romantic doesn't love this way because they're weak. They love this way because they're brave enough to risk being hurt for something that actually matters. You're not chasing a fantasy. You're chasing alignment. The kind of love that feels steady, not chaotic, intense but safe, deep but mutual. And even if it takes longer, even if you have to wait, even if you get hurt along the way, you don't regret loving like this, because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. So no, you won't grow out of it. You won't harden. You won't stop wanting something real. You're a hopeless romantic because you refuse to let the world convince you that love should be shallow, casual, or disposable. And one day, someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your softness. They won't flinch at your depth. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it, and that's when you'll realize you were never hopeless. You were just holding out for something worth believing in. Being a hopeless romantic doesn't mean you believe love will save you. It means you believe it's worth showing up for. It means you don't enter connections casually. You don't date out of boredom. You don't give your heart halfway just to say you tried. When you love, you mean it. You pay attention. You remember small things. You imagine futures without realizing you're doing it. Not because you're delusional, but because that's how your mind works. You see potential where others see risk, and you know that scares people. Some people love with limits, with conditions, with an exit already planned. You don't. You love with the intention to stay if it's right. That's why breakups hit you harder. That's why disappointment lingers longer. That's why you take time to heal. Because when you commit emotionally, you don't do it lightly. People tell you to protect your heart, to be less invested, to stop giving so much, but they don't understand. Loving deeply isn't something you can switch off. It's how you experience the world. You feel things fully. Music hits harder, memories stick longer, connection means more. And yes, that makes life heavier sometimes, but it also makes it meaningful. You don't want love that feels replaceable. You don't want someone who treats you like an option among many. You want to be chosen the same way you choose, intentionally, fully, without hesitation. And until that exists, you'd rather be alone than half present in something shallow. That's the part people miss. A hopeless romantic isn't desperate for love, they're selective. They'd rather wait than cheapen the way they love just to fit in. So when you say you're a hopeless romantic, what you really mean is you still believe connection matters, you still believe loyalty is rare, you still believe love should feel like home, not like a negotiation. And even after heartbreak, after disappointment, after learning how badly love can hurt, you don't shut down, you slow down, you heal, you keep your heart intact, because the world already has enough people who don't care. What it doesn't have enough of are people willing to love honestly without pretending it's easy. And that's not weakness, that's conviction. Being a hopeless romantic isn't about expecting perfection. It's about refusing to treat love like something disposable. It's knowing that connection is rare and not watering it down just to seem unaffected. You don't fall for people easily, but when you do, it's intentional. You don't love out of loneliness, you love out of recognition. There's a moment where you see someone, not just who they are, but who they could be with you, and something in you locks in, not obsession, not fantasy, commitment, and that's where people misunderstand you. They think you're idealizing, they think you're rushing, they think you're setting yourself up to get hurt, but what they don't see is how much restraint it takes to love like this in a world that treats feelings like liabilities. You know how badly it can go. You've felt the disappointment, the silence, the slow realization that someone didn't choose you the way you chose them, and still, you don't turn cold, you don't reduce love to strategy, you don't keep score, you don't enter connections with a backup plan. Because loving halfway feels worse to you than losing someone you loved fully. You want the kind of love that's unmistakable, where effort doesn't fluctuate, where intentions don't need decoding, where loyalty isn't treated like something rare or surprising. You want love that's steady, not loud, not chaotic, not anxiety disguised as excitement, just real. And yes, that means you get hurt deeper, because when you love, you're all the way in. You don't protect yourself by caring less. You protect yourself by choosing carefully. That's the difference. A hopeless romantic isn't reckless. They're discerning. They'd rather be alone than share space with someone who makes them feel like they're asking for too much just by wanting honesty, effort, and presence. And if that means waiting longer, so be it. Because you're not waiting for attention. You're waiting for alignment. For someone who doesn't flinch at your depth, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't need you to tone it down to make things easier. Someone who sees the way you love and says, good, I do too. So no, you won't stop being a hopeless romantic, not because you haven't learned, but because you've learned exactly what it costs and you've decided it's still worth it. Being a hopeless romantic means you don't know how to love a little. You either feel it or you don't. And when you feel it, it changes the way you move. You start noticing the small things, the way someone texts you when they're busy, the way they remember what you said weeks ago, the way they look at you when you're not trying, and you don't call that doing too much, you call that real. But the world tries to train that out of you. It tells you to be chill, to act like you don't care, to keep your feelings locked up until someone earns them. So you try to play that role, you try to be distant, try to be casual, try to treat love like it's just another thing, and it never works, because that's not who you are. You don't want a connection where you're constantly guessing. You don't want to be with someone who makes loyalty feel rare. You don't want a love that only shows up when it's convenient. You want the kind of love that feels chosen, not maybe, not we'll see, not I'm not sure, chosen. And sometimes that's what makes it lonely, because you keep meeting people who like the attention but don't respect the intention. People who love the way you make them feel but don't want to carry the responsibility of caring back, so you end up doing the hardest thing for someone like you. You walk away, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally realized love shouldn't require you to beg for consistency. A hopeless romantic doesn't stay where they're confused. They don't keep giving their heart to someone who treats it like something optional. They'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone, and that's not weakness, that's standards. Because if you love deeply, you have to protect that depth, not by becoming cold, but by becoming honest about what you need, and what you need is simple: presence, effort, loyalty, clarity. The kind of love that doesn't make you question yourself for wanting something real. What hurts the most as a hopeless romantic isn't rejection. It's realizing someone enjoyed being loved by you, but never intended to love you the same way. They liked the attention, the consistency, the way you showed up without hesitation, but when it came time to match that energy, to choose you with the same certainty, they hesitated, and that hesitation sticks with you because you don't love casually, you don't give pieces of yourself without meaning to. So when someone accepts your love without offering clarity in return, it feels like betrayal, even if they never promised anything. That's the quiet pain of being a hopeless romantic. You assume people love the way you do, with intention, with follow-through, with the understanding that feelings carry weight, and when they don't, you start questioning yourself. Am I asking for too much? Am I moving too fast? Am I wrong for wanting something solid? But the truth is, you weren't wrong. You were just loving someone who didn't have the same capacity. Some people like being cared for more than they like caring back. They want the benefits of your depth without the responsibility of meeting it, and learning that forces you to grow. Not by loving less, but by loving smarter. You start paying attention to actions, to consistency, to whether someone shows up when it's easy and when it's inconvenient. You stop pouring into people who only give when it suits them, not because you've become colder, but because you've learned your heart isn't something everyone deserves access to. Being a hopeless romantic doesn't mean you accept crumbs. It means you believe in love enough to walk away when it's not being returned honestly. And that's the part people don't see. Your softness comes with strength, your depth comes with discernment, because loving deeply also means knowing when to stop. Being a hopeless romantic means waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept love that's almost right. They grow quieter, they grow distant, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you know that could never be you. You don't want a relationship that slowly drains you. You don't want love that feels like compromise from the very beginning. So you wait. Not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you attach, how fully you commit, how once your heart is in, it doesn't wander. And you also know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. It gets taken for granted, it gets tested, it gets stretched until it starts hurting more than it should. So patience becomes protection. You don't rush intimacy. You don't force connection. You let people show you who they are before you give them access to who you are. That's not fear. That's wisdom earned the hard way. Some days the waiting feels heavy. You watch people pair off quickly. You hear about relationships that just happened. You wonder if maybe you're overthinking things, but deep down you know the truth. You're not waiting for attention. You're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch when things get real, who doesn't pull back when feelings deepen, who doesn't treat commitment like a loss of freedom. You want someone who stays present, who chooses you clearly, who doesn't make you question whether you're asking for too much, because to you, love isn't supposed to feel confusing. It's supposed to feel steady, and until that exists, being alone is still better than being half-loved. That's the quiet strength of being a hopeless romantic. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't lower your standards just to say you're not alone. You wait, not because you're hopeless, but because you believe the right love won't require you to betray yourself. People like you feel things more intensely, not because you're dramatic, but because you're present. When something matters to you, it doesn't sit quietly in the background, it moves through you, it stays with you. Love doesn't just pass through your life, it marks it. That's why moments linger longer, why memories feel heavier, why connections don't fade easily once they've mattered. And people tell you that's a problem. They say you should care less, detach quicker, move on faster. But they don't understand what intensity really is. Intensity isn't chaos, it isn't instability, it isn't losing control. It's depth. It's the ability to feel joy fully and grief honestly, to experience connection without numbing yourself just to make it easier. You don't skim life, you dive into it. And that's why love feels different to you than it does to most people. You don't forget easily, you don't replace people quickly, you don't treat connection like something interchangeable. When you love, it's intentional. That's why heartbreak hits harder. Because you didn't hold back, you didn't love with conditions, you didn't prepare an exit in advance, you showed up honestly. And while that hurts more in the moment, it also means something important. Nothing about your love was fake. You don't look back wondering if you tried hard enough, if you cared enough, if you were too guarded. You know you gave what you had, and that kind of certainty matters. Intensity becomes a problem only when it's given to the wrong people. With the right person, your depth won't feel overwhelming, it'll feel grounding. They won't ask you to tone it down. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't treat your feelings like something they need to manage. They'll meet you there, because the truth is, the world doesn't need fewer people who feel deeply. It needs more people who aren't afraid to. And being a hopeless romantic means you refuse to apologize for having a heart that actually shows up. At some point, you learn how to guard your heart without becoming guarded. That's a hard balance for someone like you, because you don't want to turn cold. You don't want to love halfway. You don't want to build walls so high that nothing real can get in. But you also know what happens when you give too much, too soon, to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. So you change, not by loving less, but by loving slower. You stop giving access before effort is proven. You stop filling in the gaps when someone shows you inconsistency. You stop romanticizing potential over behavior, and that doesn't feel natural at first, because you're used to leading with your heart, used to giving people the benefit of the doubt, used to assuming good intentions, but experience teaches you something important. Being open doesn't mean being unprotected. You can still be warm without being available to everyone. You can still be deep without drowning in the wrong places, so you watch, you listen, You notice who shows up consistently and who only appears when it's convenient. You let people reveal themselves instead of rushing to explain them. And that's when your love becomes safer, not smaller. You're still a hopeless romantic. You still believe in connection. You still want that kind of love where effort feels mutual and presence feels natural. But now, you don't mistake interest for intention. You don't confuse words with commitment. You don't chase clarity. You wait to see it. And that patience isn't fear, it's respect for yourself, because you finally understand that the right person won't need you to rush your heart to keep them close. They'll move at a pace that protects what you're building together. And when you feel that, you won't have to second guess it. You'll know. There's a phase every hopeless romantic goes through that feels especially isolating. It's the part where you've learned enough to stop choosing the wrong people, but you haven't met the right one yet. So you're not heartbroken anymore. You're not chasing. You're not settling. You're just alone, and people don't understand that version of you. They assume you've become distant, that you've lost interest, that you've changed, but really you've just stopped forcing connection where it doesn't fit. You're not closed off. You're selective. You're not cold. You're careful. You've reached a place where surface level attention doesn't move you anymore. Small talk feels hollow. Inconsistent effort feels loud. Mixed signals feel exhausting. So you walk away sooner. You disengage faster. You don't explain yourself as much, and that can feel lonely because now you're surrounded by people but not met by anyone. You want depth. You want presence. You want someone who doesn't flinch when emotions enter the room, and until that shows up, nothing else feels worth your heart. This is usually the point where people tell you to lower your standards, to be more flexible, to give someone a chance, but they don't understand what it costs you to love the wrong person. They don't feel the aftermath the way you do, the way it lingers, the way it reshapes you, so you hold your ground, even when it feels quiet, even when it feels like you're the only one still believing in something deeper, because you know this loneliness is different from the loneliness you felt before. Before, you were lonely because you were giving your heart to people who couldn't hold it. Now you're lonely because you're protecting it, and that difference matters. This space isn't empty. It's the space right before alignment. The moment right before someone finally sees the way you love and doesn't ask you to soften it. And even though it's hard, even though it tests your patience, you stay here because you know the right love won't arrive while you're busy entertaining the wrong ones. Being a hopeless romantic was never about fantasy. It was about faith. Faith that connection matters, that loyalty still means something, that choosing one person fully isn't outdated, it's intentional. For a long time, you wondered if this way of loving was something you were supposed to grow out of, if heartbreak was meant to harden you, if disappointment was meant to teach you to want less, but it never did. Every time you tried to love casually, it felt wrong. Every time you tried to detach, you felt empty. Because loving deeply was never a habit you picked up, it was part of who you are. You weren't built to love halfway. You weren't meant to treat people like options. You weren't meant to keep one foot out the door just in case. And yes, that made the journey harder. You felt things more intensely. You lost futures you had already imagined. You walked away from people you still cared about because they couldn't meet you where you stood. But none of that was wasted. Every disappointment refined you. Every heartbreak taught you discernment. Every lonely stretch strengthened your standards, not so you'd love less about it, but so you'd love right. Now you understand something clearly. Being a hopeless romantic doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you face it and still refuse to settle. You don't want perfect love, you want present love. The kind that doesn't confuse you. The kind that doesn't require self-editing. The kind that chooses you with the same certainty you offer in return. And when that finally arrives, it won't feel overwhelming. It won't feel chaotic. It won't feel like something you have to chase. It'll feel calm, mutual. safe. You won't wonder where you stand. You won't question if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. And in that moment, everything will make sense. All the waiting, all the walking away, all the times you chose being alone over being half loved. You weren't too much. You were just ahead of your time in a world that forgot how to love with intention. So no, being a hopeless romantic isn't something you need to fix. It's something you protect, because when the right person finally meets you there, they won't try to change you. They'll recognize you, and you'll realize you were never hopeless at all. You were just holding out for a love that was worthy of you. The worst kind of pain isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still getting left behind, because opening up isn't casual. You don't hand your real self to just anyone. You let them in on the stuff you normally keep locked up, the thoughts you argue with at 2 a.m., the fears you laugh off so nobody worries, the way you care so hard it almost feels embarrassing. And for a minute, it feels like you finally found someone safe. They read your silence correctly. They hear what you don't say. They look at you like they're not guessing, like they actually know. And that's the part that makes you soften. Then one day, they're gone. No fight. No goodbye that matches how close it felt. No ending that makes sense. Just nothing. And that nothing is loud. It sits where the connection used to be. It makes you replay everything like a crime scene. What did I do? Was I too much? Did I share too early? Should I have stayed guarded? But listen, if someone leaves after you showed them the real you, that doesn't mean you were wrong for being real. It doesn't mean your depth is a problem. It just means they weren't prepared for what they asked to see. Being open isn't the mistake. The mistake is thinking you should shrink so people won't run, because the right people don't disappear when they understand you. They get closer. After they leave, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, because now you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself you were when you felt understood. You replay everything, not because you're obsessed, but because your brain is trying to make sense of something that never got an ending. You think about the way they listened, the way they noticed things nobody else did, the way you didn't have to explain yourself all the time, and now they're gone. So your mind starts filling in the gaps. You assume it must have been something you said, something you revealed too early, something you should have kept to yourself. That's how loss works when there's no closure. Your brain turns inward and starts pointing fingers. You don't just lose the person, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start telling yourself, yeah, next time don't say so much. Next time don't get attached. Next time stay surface level. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin shrinking, not because you want to, but because you're trying to protect yourself from feeling that again. But here's the part nobody tells you. What hurt wasn't opening up. What hurt was being met halfway and then abandoned. That doesn't mean vulnerability is dangerous. It means inconsistency is. And there's a difference. After something like that, trust doesn't disappear all at once. It just changes shape. You don't stop believing in people. You stop believing in consistency. You start noticing patterns everywhere, a slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone that probably means nothing, but your body reacts like it's everything. Because once you've been left after being seen, your nervous system remembers it before your mind does. So you stay alert, not dramatic, just cautious. You don't lean in the same way anymore. You hold back details. You soften your honesty. You keep parts of yourself for later, just in case later never comes. And the messed up part is, people don't always notice you doing this. They just feel a distance they can't explain. You still care. You're still present, but there's a layer of protection now, like glass between you and them, and you hate that because you remember how it felt before, how natural it was to let someone know you, how easy it felt to just exist without guarding every word. Now every connection feels like a risk assessment. Is this safe? Will they stay? Am I getting too close again? You don't ask these questions out loud, you just feel them, and slowly you start mistaking caution for growth. You tell yourself you're being mature, when really you're just afraid of reliving the same ending. But here's the truth. Trust didn't break because you opened up. It broke because someone showed you intimacy without responsibility, and that's not your fault. After being left like that, most people learn the wrong lesson. They think the problem was caring too much, They think the solution is to care less, so they start editing themselves. They become easier, quieter, less honest, less intense. They tell themselves, next time don't go so deep, next time don't show everything, next time stay in control. But all that really does is teach you how to survive connection, not how to experience it. You don't stop wanting closeness. You just start rationing it. You give people pieces instead of presence, versions instead of truth, highlights instead of depth, and then you wonder why connections feel empty now, why conversations don't hit the same, why nobody really knows you anymore, why being around people still feels lonely. It's because you didn't heal. You adapted. You learned how to avoid pain, not how to build something real again. And here's the hard truth. If someone can only stay when you're small, they were never meant to know you fully. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect you. It just delays the same outcome. Because the people who leave when you're honest would have left eventually anyway. All hiding does is make you lose yourself before they're even gone. At some point, you have to unlearn the lie that your depth is what pushed them away. Because if depth were the problem, it would hurt everyone the same. But it doesn't. Some people lean into it, others panic. And the difference has nothing to do with you. Depth only feels overwhelming to people who haven't met themselves yet. To someone who avoids their own emotions, your honesty feels like pressure, your awareness feels like exposure, your care feels like responsibility. So they leave. Not because you were too much, but because staying would have required them to show up in ways they weren't ready for. And that's important to understand. You weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking for forever. You were just asking for presence, consistency, communication, effort that matched the closeness they accepted. That's not intensity, that's basic emotional accountability. But when someone isn't capable of that, they label it as too deep because it's easier than admitting they don't know how to stay. So no, your depth wasn't the problem. The problem was inviting someone into a space they didn't know how to hold. And that doesn't mean you should become lighter. It means you should become more selective. After something like this, a lot of people start punishing themselves without realizing it. They replay the moment over and over, looking for where they went wrong. They tell themselves, I should have seen it coming, I should have known better, I should have protected myself. But that's not growth, that's blame dressed up as reflection. You didn't fail by trusting, you didn't mess up by being open, you didn't lose because you cared, you just encountered someone who could only meet you halfway. And instead of letting that truth land, you turned it inward. You started questioning your instincts, your emotions, your ability to choose people. That's how one loss turns into self-doubt. You don't just grieve the person, you grieve your confidence in yourself, and slowly you start believing that maybe you're bad at choosing, that maybe your judgment can't be trusted. But here's what matters. You didn't misjudge their potential. You misjudge their capacity. Those are not the same thing. Someone can see you, feel close to you, even care about you, and still not be capable of staying. That doesn't mean your instincts are broken. It means you gave someone access before you saw their limits clearly. That's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from without hardening, because the goal isn't to trust less, it's to trust wiser. Opening up again after something like that feels risky, not because you don't want connection, but because you don't want to disappear inside it. You move slower this time, not closed, just intentional. You stop rushing closeness. You let consistency show itself before attachment does. You watch how someone handles honesty, not just how they respond to it, because being open doesn't mean being available to everyone. It means choosing who earns access. You learn that real safety isn't instant chemistry. It's follow-through. It's effort that doesn't fade when things get quiet. It's someone staying curious instead of pulling away. And you stop over-explaining yourself. You don't justify your needs. You don't apologize for caring. You don't chase clarity from people who disappear. Instead of communicate, that's not walls. That's boundaries. You realize you don't need to prove your depth anymore. The right people recognize it without being overwhelmed. And for the first time, opening up doesn't feel like self-abandonment. It feels like alignment. You're still honest, still real, still deep, just no longer handing your heart to people who haven't shown they can hold it. At the end of all this, you start to understand something important. The people who stay don't make you feel confused. They don't disappear when things get real. They don't make you guess where you stand. They don't make you question whether being yourself was a mistake. They stay because they see you, not in spite of it. They don't flinch at your depth. They don't rush you to be easier. They don't treat your honesty like a burden. They meet you with steadiness, not perfection. Not constant intensity, just consistency, and that's how you know. Because real connection doesn't feel like walking on glass. It doesn't make you anxious after silence. It doesn't leave you replaying everything you said. It feels calm, grounded, safe in a way that doesn't need explaining. You stop wondering if you're too much. You stop preparing yourself for disappearance. You stop shrinking to be kept. And you realize something quietly powerful. The people who left weren't proof that you were hard to love. They were proof that you were inviting people into a depth they hadn't earned yet. And that's not something to regret, because being seen was never a mistake. Being honest was never a flaw. Caring deeply was never the wrong move. The right people won't vanish once they understand you. They'll stay because of it. The worst kind of pain isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still getting left behind. Because opening up isn't casual. You don't hand your real self to just anyone. You let them in on the stuff you normally keep locked up, the thoughts you argue with at 2 a.m., the fears you laugh off so nobody worries, the way you care so hard it almost feels embarrassing, and for a minute it feels like you finally found someone safe. They read your silence correctly. They hear what you don't say. They look at you like they're not guessing, like they actually know. And that's the part that makes you soften. Then one day, they're gone. No fight, no goodbye that matches how close it felt. No ending that makes sense, just nothing. And that nothing is loud. It sits where the connection used to be. It makes you replay everything like a crime scene. What did I do? Was I too much? Did I share too early? Should I have stayed guarded? But listen, if someone leaves after you showed them the real you, that doesn't mean you were wrong for being real. It doesn't mean your depth is a problem. It just means they weren't prepared for what they asked to see. Being open isn't the mistake. The mistake is thinking you should shrink so people won't run. Because the right people don't disappear when they understand you. They get closer. After they leave, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, because now you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself you were when you felt understood. You replay everything, not because you're obsessed, but because your brain is trying to make sense of something that never got an ending. You think about the way they listened, the way they noticed things nobody else did, the way you didn't have to explain yourself all the time, and now they're gone. So your mind starts filling in the gaps. You assume it must have been something you said, something you revealed too early, something you should have kept to yourself. That's how loss works when there's no closure. Your brain turns inward and starts pointing fingers. You don't just lose the person, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start telling yourself, next time, don't say so much. Next time, don't get attached. Next time, stay surface level. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin shrinking. Not because you want to, but because you're trying to protect yourself from feeling that again. But here's the part nobody tells you. What hurt wasn't opening up. What hurt was being met halfway and then abandoned. That doesn't mean vulnerability is dangerous. It means inconsistency is. And there's a difference. After something like that, trust doesn't disappear all at once. It just changes shape. You don't stop believing in people. You stop believing in consistency. You start noticing patterns everywhere. A slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone that probably means nothing, but your body reacts like it's everything, because once you've been left after being seen, your nervous system remembers it before your mind does. So you stay alert, not dramatic, just cautious. You don't lean in the same way anymore. You hold back details. You soften your honesty. You keep parts of yourself for later, just in case later never comes. And the messed up part is, people don't always notice you doing this. They just feel a distance they can't explain. You still care. You're still present, but there's a layer of protection now, like glass between you and them, and you hate that because you remember how it felt before, how natural it was to let someone know you, how easy it felt to just exist without guarding every word. Now every connection feels like a risk assessment. Is this safe? Will they stay? Am I getting too close again? You don't ask these questions out loud, you just feel them, and slowly you start mistaking caution for growth. You tell yourself you're being mature, when really you're just afraid of reliving the same ending. But here's the truth, trust didn't break because you opened up. It broke because someone showed you intimacy without responsibility, and that's not your fault. After being left like that, most people learn the wrong lesson. They think the problem was caring too much. They think the solution is to care less, so they start editing themselves. They become easier, quieter, less honest, less intense. They tell themselves, next time don't go so deep, next time don't show everything, next time stay in control. But all that really does is teach you how to survive connection, not how to experience it. You don't stop wanting closeness, you just start rationing it. You give people pieces instead of presence, versions instead of truth, highlights instead of depth, and then you wonder why connections feel empty now, why conversations don't hit the same, why nobody really knows you anymore. Why being around people still feels lonely? It's because you didn't heal, you adapt. You learned how to avoid pain, not how to build something real again. And here's the hard truth. If someone can only stay when you're small, they were never meant to know you. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect you, it just delays the same outcome. Because the people who leave when you're honest would have left eventually anyway. All hiding does is make you lose yourself before they're even gone. At some point, you have to unlearn the lie that your depth is what pushed them away. Because if depth were the problem, it would hurt everyone the same, but it doesn't. Some people lean into it, others panic, and the difference has nothing to do with you. Depth only feels overwhelming to people who haven't met themselves yet, to someone who avoids their own emotions. Your honesty feels like pressure. Your awareness feels like exposure. Your care feels like responsibility. So they leave, not because you were too much, but because staying would have required them to show up in ways they weren't ready for. And that's important to understand. You weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking for forever. You were just asking for presence, consistency, communication, effort that matched the closeness they accepted. That's not intensity. That's basic emotional accountability. But when someone isn't capable of that, they label it as too deep because it's easier than admitting they don't know how to stay. So no, your depth wasn't the problem. The problem was inviting someone into a space they didn't know how to hold. And that doesn't mean you should become lighter. It means you should become more selective. After something like this, a lot of people start punishing themselves without realizing it. They replay the moment over and over, looking for where they went wrong. They tell themselves, I should have seen it coming. I should have known better. I should have protected myself. But that's not growth. That's blame dressed up as reflection. You didn't fail by trusting. You didn't mess up by being open. You didn't lose because you cared. You just encountered someone who could only meet you halfway. And instead of letting that truth land, you turned it inward. You started questioning your instincts, your emotions, your ability to choose people. That's how one loss turns into self-doubt. You don't just grieve the person, you grieve your confidence in yourself. And slowly you start believing that maybe you're bad at choosing, that maybe your judgment can't be trusted. But here's what matters. You didn't misjudge their potential. You misjudged their capacity. Those are not the same thing. Someone can see you, feel close to you, even care about you, and still not be capable of staying. That doesn't mean your instincts are broken. It means you gave someone access before you saw their limits clearly. That's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from without hardening, because the goal isn't to trust less. It's to trust wiser. Opening up again after something like that feels risky. Not because you don't want connection, but because you don't want to disappear inside it, so you move slower this time. Not closed, just intentional. You stop rushing closeness. You let consistency show itself before attachment does. You watch how someone handles honesty, not just how they respond to it, because being open doesn't mean being available to everyone. It means choosing who earns access. You learn that real safety isn't instant chemistry. It's follow through. It's effort that doesn't fade when things get quiet. It's someone staying curious instead of pulling away. And you stop over explaining yourself. You don't justify your needs. You don't apologize for caring. You don't chase clarity from people who disappear instead of communicate. That's not walls, that's boundaries. You realize you don't need to prove your depth anymore. The right people recognize it without being overwhelmed, and for the first time, opening up doesn't feel like self-abandonment. It feels like alignment. You're still honest, still real, still deep, just no longer handing your heart to people who haven't shown they can hold it. At the end of all this, you start to understand something important. The people who stay don't make you feel confused. They don't disappear when things get real. They don't make you guess where you stand. They don't make you question whether being yourself was a mistake. They stay because they see you, not in spite of it. They don't flinch at your depth. They don't rush you to be easier. They don't treat your honesty like a burden. They meet you with steadiness, not perfection, not constant intensity, just consistency. And that's how you know. Because real connection doesn't feel like walking on glass. It doesn't make you anxious after silence. It doesn't leave you replaying everything you said. It feels calm, grounded, safe in a way that doesn't need explaining. You stop wondering if you're too much. You stop preparing yourself for disappearance. You stop shrinking to be kept, and you realize something quietly powerful. The people who left weren't proof that you were hard to love. They were proof that you were inviting people into a depth they hadn't earned yet. And that's not something to regret, because being seen was never a mistake. Being honest was never a flaw. Caring deeply was never the wrong move. The right people won't vanish once they understand you. They'll stay because of it. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you have to let them go. Not slowly, not halfway, not with one foot still stuck in the past. You have to actually let them go, because they're not coming back. Not in the way you want, not in the way you deserve. And holding on to that hope is what's keeping you stuck. That's the hardest part to accept. Not the loss itself, but the finality of it. The idea that the version of them you're waiting for doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe it never did. You keep replaying memories, rereading old messages, telling yourself that if you just wait a little longer, they'll realize what they lost. That they'll come back changed, more sure, more ready. But the truth is, if they wanted to come back, they would have already. Letting go feels like betrayal. Like you're giving up on something that once meant everything to you. It feels wrong to stop caring when you cared so deeply for so long. Your mind keeps fighting it, saying just one more day, just one more chance, just one more sign. But every extra day you hold on is another day you delay your own healing. You don't let go because you stop loving them. You let go because loving them is costing you yourself, your peace, your sleep, your confidence, your ability to be present. You've been living in a constant state of waiting for a text, waiting for clarity, waiting for closure that isn't coming, and that waiting has slowly been draining you. Here's what nobody tells you. Closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes closure is realizing that silence is the answer, that their absence is the explanation, that the confusion you feel is the clarity you've been avoiding. Because someone who truly wants to be in your life won't make you question where you stand. You keep thinking that letting go means nothing good will ever replace what you lost, that you missed your chance, that this was the one. That's grief talking, not truth. Grief narrows your vision, makes the past feel bigger than the future. It convinces you that the best days are behind you, when in reality they haven't even happened yet. Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It's a series of small, painful choices. Choosing not to check their profile, choosing not to reread old messages, choosing not to fantasize about a version of them that no longer exists, choosing yourself, even when it hurts. And yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, one of the hardest. But the sooner you swallow it, the sooner you can breathe again. The sooner your life starts moving forward instead of replaying the same chapter over and over. Good things are going to come again, I promise you that. But they can't find you if you're still emotionally living somewhere you no longer belong. Right now, it probably feels impossible to believe that anything good could come after this. When you lose someone you were attached to, your world shrinks. Your future starts looking empty, quiet, unfamiliar. You measure everything against them. Every laugh feels weaker. Every conversation feels forced. Every good moment feels incomplete because they're not there to share it with. That's normal. Your brain is grieving what could have been, not just what was. You're mourning the plans you never got to live out, the version of the future you built in your head, the comfort of having someone to lean on. And when that disappears, your mind panics. It tells you this was it. This was your chance. You won't feel like this again. But that voice isn't truth. It's fear. Fear tries to convince you that staying attached is safer than starting over, that even pain you recognize is better than uncertainty. So you cling to what's familiar even when it hurts you, even when it drains you, even when it keeps you stuck in the same emotional place you've been in for too long. Letting go feels like stepping into darkness. You don't know what's on the other side yet. You don't know who you'll become without them. You don't know how long it'll take to feel okay again, and that uncertainty is terrifying. But staying where you are guarantees one thing: nothing changes. You don't heal by holding on tighter. You heal by loosening your grip, even when every part of you wants to resist. You heal by accepting that some people are meant to be chapters, not whole stories, that some connections exist to teach you something, not to stay forever. And yeah, it hurts to admit that someone you love doesn't have a place in your life anymore. It hurts to realize that effort wasn't enough, that love alone couldn't fix timing, readiness, or their inability to choose you fully. But pain doesn't mean failure. Pain means you cared. Pain means you were real. You're not weak for struggling to let go. You're human. But don't confuse holding on with loyalty. Don't confuse waiting with strength. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something you still want because you know it's no longer good for you. You're not erasing them by letting go. You're releasing yourself. One of the most painful realizations you'll have is that letting go isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about finally admitting that you've been living for something that no longer exists, that you've been holding space in your heart for someone who stopped holding space for you a long time ago. You tell yourself you're just being patient, that you're strong for waiting, that real love doesn't give up, but there's a difference between patience and self-abandonment. There's a difference between fighting for something and fighting yourself every single day just to survive it, and deep down, you know which one this has become. You've been stuck in this cycle of hope and disappointment. One day you feel okay, almost proud of how far you've come. The next day, a memory hits you out of nowhere and you're right back at the beginning. A song, a place, a random thought at 2 a.m., and suddenly your chest feels heavy again. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you haven't fully let go yet, because part of you is still waiting for them to validate what you felt, to admit they hurt you, to say they cared as much as you did. But here's the truth you don't want to accept yet. You may never get that. And waiting for it is only keeping you tied to someone who already moved on. Letting go means accepting unanswered questions. It means choosing peace over understanding. It means realizing that not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be released, and that's uncomfortable because your heart wants certainty, wants meaning, it wants closure wrapped in a conversation that makes everything make sense. But sometimes closure is recognizing that someone's inability to choose you is the answer, that their silence, their distance, their inconsistency already told you everything you needed to know. You just weren't ready to hear it yet. You didn't imagine the connection. You didn't make it all up. What you felt was real. But real feelings don't guarantee a real future, and holding on to that distinction is one of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn. You're not behind for struggling with this. You're not weak for missing them, but you are allowed to stop suffering for someone who isn't suffering without you. There comes a moment where you have to be honest with yourself about what you're really holding on to. Is it them, or is it the version of them you created in your head? The version that would have changed, the version that would have stayed, the version that would have finally chosen you the way you needed, because most of the time, that's what keeps you stuck. Not reality, but imagination. You fell in love with potential, with what could have been. If things were different, if timing was better, if they were more emotionally available, if they wanted the same future you did. But you can't build a life on ifs, and you can't heal while you're still negotiating with the past. Your heart keeps saying just a little longer. Your mind keeps saying maybe one more chance. But your body is exhausted, tired of carrying the weight, tired of the anxiety, tired of waking up every day with the same ache in your chest. That's your sign. Not everything that hurts is meant to be held on to. Letting go doesn't mean you pretend it didn't matter. It mattered deeply. That's why it hurts. But there's a difference between honoring what you felt and imprisoning yourself in it. You're allowed to acknowledge the love without chaining yourself to the loss. And here's something important. Moving on doesn't mean you'll forget them. You won't. Certain people leave marks on us, but those marks don't have to control where we go next. They can be reminders instead of wounds, lessons instead of anchors. Right now you're still looking backward, trying to make sense of something that already ended, but life doesn't unfold in reverse. There are people you haven't met yet, versions of yourself you haven't grown into yet, moments that will make this pain feel smaller in comparison. You just can't see them because you're still standing in the doorway of what was. Letting go is choosing to step forward even when your legs are shaking, even when you're scared of what's next, even when you don't feel ready, because staying where you are is hurting you more than leaving ever could. One of the hardest things you'll face once you start letting go is the emptiness it leaves behind. Not just emotional emptiness, but routine emptiness. They used to be part of your day, someone you talked to when something good happened, someone you leaned on when things went wrong. And now there's this silence where their presence used to be. That silence can feel unbearable at first. Your instinct will be to fill it with distractions, with new people, with anything that keeps you from sitting with the loss. And while distractions can help temporarily, they won't heal you if you use them to avoid feeling, because healing requires you to feel it fully, to sit in the discomfort, to accept that this chapter ended and that it's okay to grieve it. You might catch yourself wanting to reach out, not because you have something to say, but because you miss the familiarity, the comfort, the version of yourself that existed when they were around. But understand this, missing someone doesn't mean they're meant to be in your life again. It just means they were once important. There's a difference between love and attachment. Love wants what's best for both people. Attachment wants relief from pain. And most of the time when you want to go back, it's attachment talking, not love. It's the part of you that's scared of being alone, not the part that's thinking clearly. This is where growth actually happens. In the moments where you choose not to reach out, where you choose to sit with the ache instead of numbing it. You choose yourself even when it feels lonely. Every time you make that choice, you're rebuilding trust with yourself. You're proving that you can survive without them. And slowly, that silence won't feel so loud anymore. It'll start to feel like space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to rediscover who you are without them. And in that space, something new begins to form. Not another person, but a stronger version of you. One of the hardest things you'll face once you start letting go is the emptiness it leaves behind. Not just emotional emptiness, but routine emptiness. It used to be part of your day. Someone you talked to when something good happened, someone you leaned on when things went wrong. And now there's this silence where their presence used to be. That silence can feel unbearable at first. Your instinct will be to fill it with distractions, with new people, with anything that keeps you from sitting with the loss. And while distractions can help temporarily, they won't heal you if you use them to avoid feeling, because healing requires you to feel it fully, to sit in the discomfort, to accept that this chapter ended and that it's okay to grieve it. You might catch yourself wanting to reach out, not because you have something to say, but because you miss the familiarity, the comfort, the version of yourself that existed when they were around. But understand this. Missing someone doesn't mean they're meant to be in your life again. It just means they were once important. There's a difference between love and attachment. Love wants what's best for both people. Attachment wants relief from pain, and most of the time when you want to go back, it's attachment talking, not love. It's the part of you that's scared of being alone, not the part that's thinking clearly. This is where growth actually happens. And the moments where you choose not to reach out, where you choose to sit with the ache instead of numbing it, where you choose yourself even when it feels lonely, every time you make that choice, you're rebuilding trust with yourself. You're proving that you can survive without them. And slowly that silence won't feel so loud anymore. It will start to feel like space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to rediscover who you are without them. And in that space, something new begins to form, not another person, but a stronger version of you. Eventually you start noticing small shifts, not dramatic ones, nothing that feels like a movie moment, just quiet changes. You wake up and they aren't the first thought in your head anymore. You go a few hours without checking your phone. You laugh at something and realize it didn't immediately remind you of them, and for a second you feel guilty for that. Like moving forward means erasing what you had. It doesn't. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong, other days a random memory will knock the wind out of you. It doesn't mean you're going backwards, it means you're human. You spend time building something emotionally, tearing it down takes time too. Be patient with yourself in that process. This is also when clarity starts setting in. You begin to see things more honestly, the red flags you ignored, the effort imbalance, the moments where you shrunk yourself just to keep them around. You realize how often you settled for breadcrumbs and called it love because you didn't want to accept the truth. And instead of hurting you, that realization empowers you. because now you know what you don't want. You know what you won't tolerate again. You know that love shouldn't feel like confusion, anxiety, or constant self-doubt. It shouldn't make you question your worth. It shouldn't require you to beg for effort or clarity. You also start forgiving yourself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for ignoring your intuition. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. That version of you was just trying to be loved. There's nothing shameful about that. And slowly you stop romanticizing the past. You stop replaying only the good parts. You start remembering the nights you felt lonely even when they were still around. The times you felt anxious instead of secure. The moments you felt like you were asking for too much when you were really just asking the wrong person. That's when letting go stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like relief. At some point, you stop asking yourself why it didn't work. That question loses its power, not because you found every answer, but because you finally realized the answers wouldn't change the outcome. Understanding doesn't always heal you. Acceptance does. You accept that you loved genuinely, even if it wasn't returned the same way. You accept that you showed up fully, even if they didn't know how to meet you there. You accept that some people come into your life to teach you something, not to stay forever. And that lesson, as painful as it was, shaped you into someone wiser. You start trusting yourself again, trusting your judgment, trusting your ability to walk away when something doesn't feel right, trusting that if something ends, you will survive it. That trust is powerful. It changes how you approach everything else in your life. You become more intentional with your time, with your energy, with who you allow access to you. You no longer chase people who are unsure about you. You no longer explain your worth to anyone. You no longer wait around hoping someone will choose you, because you already chose yourself, and that choice shifts everything. You realize you don't need someone to complete you. You're already whole. You wanted them, yes, but you don't need them to be okay. That realization doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. Free from the constant anxiety, free from the emotional limbo, free from the cycle of waiting. You still believe in love, you still want connection, but now you want it without losing yourself, without shrinking, without begging, without settling. You want something that adds to your life, not something you have to recover from, and that's how you know you're healing. Not when the pain disappears completely, but when it no longer controls your decisions. I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but you have to let them go. Not because you didn't care enough, not because what you felt wasn't real, but because holding on to something that's already gone is only hurting you more. They're not coming back, and I know that's a hard pill to swallow. It's one of those truths that sits heavy in your chest because part of you is still hoping, still replaying memories, still thinking maybe one day things will go back to how they were. But the truth is, if they wanted to come back, they would have. You wouldn't be sitting here questioning everything. You wouldn't be overanalyzing every small sign. You wouldn't be waiting for a text that never comes. Someone who wants to be in your life makes that clear. They don't leave you guessing, they don't disappear, and expect you to keep the door open forever. Letting go doesn't mean what you had didn't matter. It doesn't erase the memories, the connection, or the time you shared. It just means you're choosing to stop living in the past. You're choosing to stop punishing yourself by holding on to something that no longer exists, and that choice takes strength, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. I know part of you is scared. Scared that letting go means starting over. Scared that you won't feel that way about anyone else again. Scared that this was your one chance at something special. But that fear is lying to you. Life doesn't give you just one opportunity for love, connection, or happiness. It gives you many, but only if you make space for them. The sooner you let go, the sooner you heal. The sooner you stop checking their page, rereading old messages, and asking yourself what you did wrong, the sooner you start moving forward. And moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting. It means allowing yourself to grow past this version of your life. Good things are going to come again, not the exact same things, not the same person, not the same situation, but something new, something healthier, something that won't leave you feeling confused, unchosen, or stuck. I promise you that. So let this be your reminder. You don't need to keep holding on to prove how much you cared. You've done enough. It's okay to release what no longer serves you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is finally say goodbye, even when part of you still wishes they'd stay. You know that one friend who always looks fine on the outside? The one who never really asks for help? The one who somehow holds everything together without making a sound? They're the one who cracks jokes when the room feels awkward, the one who lightens the mood when things get heavy, the one who says, "I'm good," so casually that nobody questions it, but if you look closely, their eyes tell a different story. They're always there, always listening, always giving advice, always making time. If someone's hurting, they show up. If someone needs comfort, they provide it. If someone feels lost, they help them find direction. They became the glue without ever asking to be. And over time, they learned something dangerous. They learned that people rely on them being strong. They learned that when they show pain, It makes others uncomfortable, so they stop showing it. They mastered the art of looking okay. You don't see how tired they really are. You don't see the nights they sit in silence, staring at nothing, trying to keep themselves from falling apart. They laugh, but it's lighter now. They smile, but it doesn't reach the same places it used to. They say they're just tired, when in reality they're exhausted in ways sleep can't fix. They learned how to bottle everything up, how to swallow emotions mid-sentence, how to carry pain quietly so no one else has to deal with it, because they don't want to be a burden. They don't want to ruin the mood. They don't want to take up space, so they shrink themselves emotionally, even while holding space for everyone else. And the craziest part, they're not asking to be saved. They don't want attention. They don't want pity. They don't want grand gestures. They just want someone to notice, someone to really ask how they're doing and actually stay for the answer. Someone to notice that their laughter sounds a little forced lately, that their messages are shorter, that they're physically present but mentally somewhere else. Someone to say, you don't have to be strong right now, because being the strong one gets lonely. You carry everyone else's weight and still feel guilty for having your own. You feel like you don't have permission to fall apart because everyone else depends on you staying together. But even strong people need rest. Even strong people need to cry. Even strong people need reassurance. Strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means breaking quietly and still showing up. And that's not fair. So if you have that friend, the one who's always okay, the one who never complains, the one who holds everyone else together, check on them, not with a quick, you good? Not with a surface level question. Check on them with presence, with patience, with a real conversation. Because sometimes the people who seem the most okay are the ones who need love the most. And sometimes all it takes is one person finally seeing them for the weight they've been carrying alone. No one really talks about how long some men are willing to wait for the one person they truly want. Not days, not weeks, months, sometimes years. And it usually starts with something small, something that doesn't sound final. She says, maybe one day. I'm just not ready right now. I need time. And he hears that like it's a promise, like it means not now doesn't mean never. So he holds on to those words, replays them, builds hope around them, and he waits. He doesn't make it obvious, he doesn't beg, he doesn't pressure. He waits quietly, patiently, convincing everyone, including himself, that he's fine. Because when a man sees you in his future, when he's already chosen you in his heart, waiting feels easier than letting go. He tells himself she's healing, she's figuring things out. She'll come back when she's ready. And sometimes it's hard to tell if that kind of waiting is beautiful or self-destructive, because love like that is rare. A man who's willing to pause his own needs, put his feelings on hold, stay loyal to the idea of you without knowing if you'll ever choose him back. That's not weakness, that's commitment. But commitment without clarity can slowly break someone. So if you have a man like that, someone willing to wait while you sort through your life, you can't treat that lightly. Take the time you need, heal what you need to heal, do what you need to do. But don't let him wait if you already know you're not coming back. Because the cruelest thing is letting someone hold on to hope when all that's waiting for them is disappointment. A lot of men won't walk away. They'll keep telling themselves one more month, one more sign, one more chance. Not because they're desperate, but because they care. So if you can love him again, do it fully. And if you can't, tell him, don't make him wait just to slowly lose himself loving someone who was never going to return. What people don't see is what waiting does to him. Not on the outside. He looks fine. He still shows up, still laughs at the right moments, still pretends he hasn't built his days around the possibility of you coming back. But inside, everything is on pause. He doesn't let himself move on, doesn't let himself get close to anyone else, doesn't let himself fully hope or fully let go, because doing either would feel like betraying the future he pictured with you. So he lives in the middle, not chosen, not free, just waiting. He rereads old messages looking for reassurance that maybe he didn't imagine the connection. He remembers how you looked at him, how you laughed with him, how real it felt, and that's what keeps him there. Not obsession, not desperation, memory. He tells himself real love requires patience, that if it's meant to be, it'll come back around. But patience without direction starts turning into quiet pain, because every time you say, I don't know yet, he hears, not now, but maybe, and maybe is enough to keep him holding on. What breaks him isn't waiting itself, It's not knowing whether the waiting means something to you too. He would wait longer if he knew it mattered. He would walk away if he knew it didn't. But uncertainty keeps him stuck, and the longer he stays there, the more of himself he puts on hold. His needs, his timing, his chance to be loved fully, all for someone who may never come back. And that's the part no one talks about. Waiting doesn't just cost time, it costs pieces of him he doesn't realize he's giving away. At some point, the waiting starts asking questions back, not out loud, not in a way he can easily answer, just quiet thoughts that show up late at night when there's nothing left to distract him. Am I being patient or am I just afraid to let go? Because there's a difference. Patience comes with trust, with direction, with some kind of reassurance that the waiting has meaning, but what he has is uncertainty. He's not waiting because he's calm. He's waiting because walking away would mean admitting that the future he imagined might never happen. And that's harder than staying still, so he tells himself stories. That love is supposed to hurt a little, that timing matters more than readiness, that if he just proves he's loyal enough, consistent enough, understanding enough, it'll all make sense one day. But love isn't supposed to feel like erasing yourself. It isn't supposed to require putting your life on hold indefinitely. It isn't supposed to make you question whether your needs matter at all. Still, he stays. His hope is quiet, but it's persistent. It whispers things like, she'll come back. She just needs time. It'll be worth it. And as long as that voice exists, letting go feels like failure, like giving up on something real. What scares him most isn't the idea of her choosing someone else. It's the idea that she might never choose anyone, and he still waited anyway. That he might look back one day and realize he sacrificed his own chance to be loved fully for someone who was never coming back. And that realization doesn't make him angry. It makes him tired. Because waiting stopped feeling romantic a long time ago. Now it just feels heavy. And deep down, he's starting to understand something he's been avoiding. Love shouldn't feel like standing still while life passes you by. There comes a moment when waiting stops feeling like love and starts feeling like self-abandonment. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic breaking point. It's quieter than that. It's the realization that his life has been moving around someone who isn't moving toward him, that he's been planning a future with someone who won't even promise a present. He notices it in small ways, how he avoids making plans because what if she comes back? How he turns down opportunities because he doesn't want to feel unavailable when she finally decides. How he measures his growth, his happiness, his healing against whether or not it would still fit her. And that's when it hits him. Waiting has slowly become a way of disappearing, not because he doesn't love her, but because loving her has started costing him himself. He tells himself love requires sacrifice, but sacrifice isn't supposed to be one-sided. Real love doesn't ask you to pause your entire life without offering anything solid in return. And for the first time, he lets himself ask a dangerous question. If she never comes back, would this still have been worth it? That question hurts because the answer isn't immediate, because a part of him still wants to believe that patience will be rewarded, but another part, the quieter, tired part, knows something has to change. He starts realizing that choosing himself doesn't mean he loved her less. It means he finally loved himself enough to stop waiting in uncertainty. Letting go doesn't erase what they had. It doesn't make the feelings fake. It doesn't turn the waiting into a mistake. It just means he's done confusing hope with a promise, because love shouldn't require you to disappear quietly just to prove you're loyal. And walking away doesn't mean he stopped caring. Sometimes it means he cared enough to stop hurting himself in silence. Letting go hurts differently than waiting ever did. Waiting was familiar, painful but predictable. It gave him something to hold on to, even if that something was uncertainty. Letting go feels like free fall, because when he finally stops waiting, there's no future version of them to lean on anymore. No, maybe one day. No imagined moment where she finally says she's ready. Just silence, and that silence is loud at first. He feels it in the empty spaces where hope used to sit, in the routines he built around the idea of her coming back. For a while, he doesn't know who he is without the waiting, because waiting gave his love direction. It gave his patience purpose. It made the pain feel meaningful. Now he has to sit with something harder, grief, not just for her, but for the version of himself who believed love always meant endurance. He realizes how long he ignored his own needs, how often he told himself later, instead of asking for what he deserved now. And that realization stings, because he wasn't weak, he was loyal. He just stayed loyal to someone who couldn't meet him where he stood. Healing doesn't come all at once. Some days he still wonders if he gave up too soon, if one more month would have changed everything. But then he remembers how heavy the waiting felt, how small his world had become, how much of himself he put on hold, and slowly something shifts. He starts choosing himself in quiet ways. He makes plans without hesitation. He opens himself to new moments without checking if they'd interfere with the future that no longer exists. And for the first time in a long time, his life starts moving forward again. Letting go didn't mean he stopped loving her. It meant he stopped abandoning himself. And that's when healing actually began. After the waiting ends, there's a strange emptiness that follows, not because he lost her, but because he lost the version of himself that believed love had to hurt to be real. For a long time, his worth was tied to patience, to loyalty, to how much he was willing to endure without being chosen back. And when that chapter closed, he didn't immediately feel strong. He felt unsure, because when you spend so long putting someone else first, you forget what it feels like to be a priority in your own life. He starts noticing it in small moments, how uncomfortable it feels to ask for what he needs, how he second guesses himself when someone shows interest too easily, because ease feels unfamiliar now. He was used to earning affection, proving commitment, waiting quietly without complaint, so when someone shows up without confusion or hesitation, it almost feels wrong. Like love should require more suffering than this. That's when he realizes how deeply the waiting shaped him. He didn't just pause his life, he learned to minimize himself. He learned that his needs could wait, that his feelings were negotiable, that love meant staying even when nothing was being offered in return. Unlearning that takes time. He has to remind himself that love isn't supposed to feel uncertain, that commitment doesn't mean self-erasure, that being chosen shouldn't feel like a reward for endurance. Slowly he starts rewriting the rules. He lets himself want clarity. He lets himself walk away when something feels one-sided. He stops confusing consistency with compatibility, and piece by piece his sense of worth comes back. Not because someone else validates it, but because he no longer abandons himself to keep someone else comfortable. He waited because he meant it, but now he understands something important. The right person won't need him to suffer quietly to prove his love. They'll meet him where he stands. Waiting leaves marks, not obvious ones. Nothing you can point to and explain easily. But after someone has waited that long, they don't love the same way again. He becomes more careful, not closed off and just aware, because once you've given that much patience to the wrong person, you learn how expensive your loyalty really is. He no longer rushes into hope, no longer builds futures in his head without evidence in the present, not because he's bitter, but because he knows what it costs to believe too soon. He listens differently now. When someone says, "I'm not ready," he hears it clearly. When someone says, "I don't know what I want," he doesn't translate it into possibility. He takes words as they are, not as promises he can grow hope around. That doesn't make him cold, it makes him intentional. He still loves deeply, still commits fully, but only where clarity exists, because waiting taught him that love shouldn't feel like uncertainty stretched over time. He no longer tries to prove his worth through endurance. He doesn't stay where effort isn't mutual. He doesn't confuse potential with reality. And that makes him harder to lose, not because he withholds love, but because he now knows when to walk away. He understands that choosing someone means choosing himself too. That real connection doesn't ask him to pause his life indefinitely. doesn't ask him to suffer quietly just to stay loyal. Waiting didn't break him, it refined him. It taught him what love isn't, though he could finally recognize what it is. And when he loves again, it won't be out of fear of losing. It will be out of certainty. The next time he loves someone, it won't start with waiting. It'll start with clarity, because once you've waited that long for someone who couldn't meet you halfway, you stop confusing effort with connection. He won't wonder where he stands anymore. He won't analyze pauses, he won't read into silence or turn uncertainty into hope, not because he's less romantic, but because he's learned what love is supposed to feel like. The next person he loves won't have to guess how he feels. They won't have to question his loyalty. They won't have to wonder if he's serious, because when he chooses fully, but this time, he'll only stay where he's chosen back. He won't pause his life waiting for someone to decide. He won't put his heart on hold for potential. He understands now that real love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't stretch uncertainty across months and years. It doesn't ask you to sacrifice peace just to stay connected. The next person will feel the difference. Not because he loves harder, but because he loves cleaner, with boundaries, with honesty, with the expectation of mutual effort. And that's the quiet shift no one sees. Waiting didn't make him bitter, it made him precise. It taught him that commitment means nothing without intention behind it. So when he gives his time again, his patience again, his heart again, it won't be because he's afraid to lose. It'll be because both of them are choosing each other in the present. Not someday, not maybe, now. The people who wait the longest are often the hardest to replace, not because they demand attention, not because they make noise, but because they loved with patience most people don't have anymore. When he was waiting, his presence felt easy to overlook. He was steady, consistent, always there, and consistency can become invisible to people who aren't ready to value it. So they assume he'll always be there, that his patience has no limit, that his loyalty is permanent. But what they don't realize is that waiting teaches restraint. It teaches someone exactly how much they're willing to give before they stop. So when he finally walks away, it's quiet, no drama, no announcement, no attempt to make anyone regret it. He just goes, and that's when the absence is felt, because he wasn't loud, he was grounding. He was the one who remembered, the one who stayed calm, the one who made things feel safe without asking for anything in return. And when that's gone, it leaves a space it's hard to fill, not with excitement, not with attention, but with depth. That's when people realize they didn't lose someone dramatic, they lost someone rare, someone who would have waited longer than anyone else, but chose not to abandon himself anymore. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that he left, but that he learned how to leave. Because once someone like that is gone, they don't come back confused. They don't come back waiting. They move forward with intention. And by the time anyone realizes what they lost, he's already chosen himself. Waiting was never the problem. The problem was waiting without being chosen back. For a long time, he believed love was proven by how much you were willing to endure, how long you could stay, how patient you could be, how quietly you could hurt without asking for reassurance, and he did that. He waited through uncertainty, through mixed signals, through not right now that never turned into I'm ready, not because he didn't value himself, but because he valued love deeply, but eventually he learned the difference between commitment and self-sacrifice. Real love doesn't keep you suspended. It doesn't ask you to pause your life while someone decides if you're worth choosing. Real love meets you where you are, and the moment he understood that, waiting lost its meaning, because waiting only makes sense when both people are moving toward each other, even slowly, not when one person is standing still hoping to be picked someday. Walking away wasn't easy. It didn't feel empowering at first. It felt like grief. Grief for the future, he imagined. Grief for the version of himself who believed patience would be rewarded no matter the cost. But over time, that grief turned into clarity. He realized something simple but life-changing. Love should feel mutual, certain, chosen in the present, not promised someday. So now, when he looks back on the waiting, he doesn't see weakness. He sees proof that he can love deeply. But he also sees the moment he learned to stop giving that depth to people who couldn't return it. He waited because he meant it, but he walked away because he finally understood that the right person won't need him to wait at all. They'll choose him clearly, willingly, and without hesitation, and that's not something you ever have to earn by putting your life on hold. You keep ignoring the red flags because all you want is love, not peace, not respect, not consistency, just love. You see the signs, you see the unanswered calls, the constant busy, the way you're always an option, never a priority. And instead of asking why it hurts, you ask how to endure it. You tell yourself it's patience, that it's loyalty, that love means staying even when it costs you. But let's be honest, she doesn't check on you. She doesn't consider your feelings. She doesn't show up the way you do. And you know that. You just don't want to face what it says about you for staying. So here's the real question you've been avoiding. How much do you actually love yourself? Because when you stay in situations that keep hurting you, when you keep accepting disrespect just to feel close to someone, that's not love. That's neglect. If you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't keep choosing pain just to feel wanted. You wouldn't keep lowering your standards to keep someone around who clearly isn't choosing you back. But you don't protect yourself, you sacrifice yourself. Because being alone scares you more than being hurt. And that's why you accept the bare minimum. That's why you stay in toxic cycles. That's why you confuse attachment with love. You're not holding on because it's good for you. You're holding on because it's the only version of love you think you deserve. And that's the lie. You don't need someone else to complete you. What you actually need is to stop outsourcing your worth. Because the moment you start loving yourself, really loving yourself, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop calling pain connection. You stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Self-love doesn't make you selfish. It makes you unavailable to anything that keeps breaking you. And until you learn that, you'll keep calling suffering love and calling survival loyalty. You are worth more than crumbs. You are worth more than confusion. You are worth more than being an option. But no one can convince you of that until you decide to believe it yourself. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You don't stay because you don't see the red flags. You stay because you think leaving means nobody else will love you, so you make excuses. She's busy. She's going through stuff. She just doesn't show love the same way. But effort isn't a love language. It's a choice. And when someone keeps choosing not to show up for you, that's not confusion, that's clarity. You're not being patient. You're being hopeful in a place that's already shown you who it is. You keep giving grace to people who wouldn't give you the same. You keep explaining your pain to someone who already decided it wasn't important enough to change. And every time you stay, you send yourself a message. My feelings come second. My needs are optional. This is the best I can get. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. You think walking away means losing them, but what you're really losing right now is respect for yourself, because someone who values you doesn't make you question your worth. They don't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear and call it space. And the reason this keeps happening isn't because you love too hard. It's because you don't love yourself hard enough to leave when you should. The moment you start choosing yourself, red flags stop looking like obstacles and start looking like exits. And exits aren't failures, they're protection. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you once, it trains people how to treat you. Every time you stay after disrespect, you teach them you'll tolerate it. Every time you forgive without change, you show them your boundaries don't mean much, and they adjust accordingly. They respond less. They try less, they care just enough to keep you around, but never enough to show up fully. Because why would they? You already proved you'll stay without effort. You think you're being understanding, but what you're really doing is normalizing behavior that shouldn't have access to you. You answer late replies immediately. You accept apologies without accountability. You let patterns repeat because you're afraid of starting over, and slowly, your standards drop while their comfort rises. That's the trade you're making. You're giving someone emotional safety while you live in emotional uncertainty. And the worst part? You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're asking for too much, that you're sensitive, that this is just how relationships are. But healthy love doesn't require endurance. You don't have to survive it. You don't have to fight for basic respect. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well. Red flags aren't challenges to overcome. They're warnings to listen to, and the longer you ignore them, the harder it becomes to remember what being valued even feels like. The pattern doesn't break when they change, it breaks when you do. The reason you keep ignoring red flags is because you confuse attachment with love. Love feels steady, attachment feels urgent. Love doesn't make you anxious. Attachment keeps you checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering where you stand, and you call that passion. But what you're really feeling is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that if you don't hold on tight, you'll be forgotten. So you cling, you stay when you should leave, you wait when there's nothing coming, you accept excuses because they're easier than facing the truth. That truth being, someone who wants you won't make you feel optional. Attachment makes you chase because it needs reassurance. Love doesn't chase, it meets. And until you learn the difference, every red flag will feel like something you just need to work through. You'll keep calling distance space, disrespect miscommunication, inconsistency timing, but your body already knows that tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that feeling of giving more than you're getting. That's not love warning you to try harder. That's your self-respect telling you to stop. You don't need clearer signs. You don't need closure. You don't need one more conversation. You need the courage to admit that attachment is keeping you stuck in places love would never ask you to stay. Walking away feels harder than staying because staying lets you avoid the truth. As long as you're still there, you can tell yourself it might change, that maybe tomorrow they'll care more, that maybe you're just being tested. Hope keeps you stuck because leaving means admitting you invested in something that wasn't good for you. It means admitting you ignored your instincts, that you stayed longer than you should have, that you loved someone who couldn't meet you halfway, and that hurts your pride. So instead, you endure. You tell yourself pain is temporary, that love requires sacrifice, that every relationship has rough patches, but here's the part you don't want to hear. Love doesn't consistently make you feel small. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. You stay because leaving forces accountability, not for them, but for you. It forces you to ask why you accepted less, why you ignored the signs, why you stayed quiet when your boundaries were crossed. And that's uncomfortable. But staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. Every day you remain in a situation that disrespects you, you reinforce the belief that this is all you deserve, and that belief is the real damage. Walking away isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on self-betrayal. And the moment you finally choose yourself, red flags stop feeling confusing. They feel obvious. The moment you stop ignoring red flags, everything gets quiet. No chaos, no anxiety spikes, no constant checking to see if someone still wants you. And at first, that silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to confusion, used to emotional ups and downs, used to love feeling like something you have to manage. So when you finally walk away, your brain starts questioning you. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe this is just how love feels. But that's just withdrawal. You're not missing them. You're missing the familiarity of the pattern because ignoring red flags wasn't just about them. It was about what you were willing to tolerate to avoid being alone. Now that you've chosen yourself, you start seeing things clearly. You realize how drained you were, how often you made excuses, how little you were actually asking for compared to how much you were giving. And that clarity changes you. You don't feel pulled toward inconsistency anymore. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't feel tempted by people who only show up halfway. Because once you experience peace, chaos stops feeling exciting. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop believing love has to hurt. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. And here's the biggest shift. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing who gets access to you, who gets your time, who gets your emotional energy. Red flags don't feel like puzzles anymore. They feel like answers. And instead of asking me, can I make this work? You ask, does this protect me? That's when self-respect kicks in. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. When you stop ignoring red flags, people from your past don't recognize you anymore. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped being convenient. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't over-justify your boundaries. You don't stay in conversations that feel disrespectful or draining, and that confuses people. They're used to the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave chances, that tried to understand at the expense of being understood. So when you walk away faster now, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're doing too much. But what they really mean is you're no longer available for the dynamic they benefited from. People who thrived on your tolerance don't like your standards. People who were comfortable with your silence don't like your clarity. And that's okay, because growth isn't about being liked, it's about being protected. You're not harsh, you're not bitter, you're not closed off. You're just done negotiating your self-respect. You no longer wait for disrespect to become unbearable before leaving. You don't need proof anymore. The first pattern is enough. And here's the part that matters most. The right people won't question this version of you. They won't push your boundaries. They won't test your tolerance. They won't need you to over-explain. They'll feel your standards and meet them naturally. Anyone who leaves because you stopped accepting red flags was never meant to stay anyway. That's not loss, that's alignment. Self-respect feels lonely at first, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped tolerating what everyone else normalized. You don't have constant access to people anymore. You don't have drama to distract you. You don't have half connections keeping you entertained. And that quiet can feel heavy, because for a long time, chaos made you feel needed, inconsistency made you feel chosen, fixing things made you feel valuable. Now none of that is there, and your brain tries to convince you that you're missing out, that maybe you were happier when you stayed, that maybe standards are overrated, that maybe being lonely is worse than being disrespected. But that's just the adjustment period. You're unlearning a pattern where love had to hurt to feel real. Self-respect strips away the noise and leaves you with truth. You start seeing how many connections were built on convenience instead of care. How many people stayed because you made it easy for them, not because they valued you. And yes, that realization stings, but it also gives you something you didn't have before. Peace, no guessing, no waiting, no emotional whiplash, just clarity. And from that clarity, your standards get quieter but stronger. You don't announce them, you don't defend them, you just live by them. And anyone who can't meet you there falls away naturally. Loneliness isn't punishment here. It's space to rebuild your sense of worth without someone else validating it. Space to remember who you are when you're not chasing or fixing or proving. And soon, that loneliness turns into confidence. Not loud confidence, stable confidence. The kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that knows red flags aren't obstacles, they're directions. At some point, you realize something uncomfortable. You don't actually miss them. You miss the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You miss the effort you gave, the hope you held on to, the belief that if you just loved harder, things would finally change because chasing gave you purpose. It made your pain feel meaningful. It made waiting feel justified. It made disappointment feel like part of the process. Now that you've stopped, there's nothing left to fix. And that's when the grief shows up. You grieve the time you spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. You grieve the energy you poured into people who never poured back. You grieve the patience you mistook for love, not because you were foolish, but because you cared. And it hurts to admit that caring didn't save anything. You start seeing clearly how often you ignored your own voice, how many times your body told you to leave while your heart begged you to stay. You stayed loyal to people who weren't loyal to your peace, and that realization is heavy, because now you can't go back, you can't unsee the patterns, you can't pretend disrespect was accidental, you can't convince yourself that red flags were just misunderstandings. You've outgrown the version of you that survived on hope alone, and while that growth is necessary, it still feels like loss. But here's the truth. You didn't lose something real. You let go of something that only existed because you kept tolerating it. And the more distance you get, the clearer it becomes. What you were missing wasn't love, it was self-respect. Ignoring red flags was never about love. It was about not wanting to choose yourself. Because choosing yourself meant walking away without guarantees, without reassurance, without someone else filling the silence, so you stayed. You told yourself love takes patience, that people need time, that your pain was just part of the process, but deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't staying because it felt right. You were staying because leaving felt terrifying, terrifying to be alone, terrifying to admit you deserved better, terrifying to sit with the idea that you chose someone who couldn't choose you back, though you ignored the signs. Not because you didn't see them, but because seeing them meant action, and action meant accountability. But here's what finally clicks. Red flags don't hurt you. Ignoring them does. Every time you stayed, you taught yourself that your needs were optional. Every time you excused behavior, you taught yourself that love should be endured. Every time you waited for change, you delayed your own growth. And that cycle doesn't end when someone finally treats you right. It ends when you stop accepting what treats you wrong. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop wanting love. It means you stop betraying yourself just to keep it. It means you walk away sooner. You trust discomfort. You listen the first time something feels off. Not because you're cold, but because you're done confusing pain with connection. And once you reach this point, red flags don't feel complicated anymore. They feel clear. You don't argue with them. You don't negotiate with them. You don't try to turn them green. You leave. Because now you understand something you didn't before. Being alone is temporary, self-betrayal is cumulative, and you're no longer willing to pay that price. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect, and that's where the cycle finally ends. Sometimes I feel like love just isn't meant for me. Not in a dramatic way, not in a woe is me way, just quietly, like I've watched it find everyone else and somehow keep missing me. I've done the work, I've tried to heal, I've tried to be patient, I've tried to love right, and still, nothing sticks. People come close, but never close enough to stay. They show interest, but never intention. I'm always almost chosen, almost loved, almost enough. And after a while, you stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's wrong with you. You start wondering if maybe you're just built differently, if maybe you feel too deeply for a world that loves lightly. I don't think love avoids me because I'm unlovable. I think it avoids me because I don't fit into how people love now. I don't do casual well. I don't know how to care halfway. I don't know how to pretend I wouldn't be hurt if it ended. And that makes people uncomfortable. They like the idea of me. They like the attention, they like being wanted, but when it comes time to choose, to commit, to stay, they hesitate. So I end up alone again, not because I didn't try, but because I refused to chase what doesn't choose me back. And that's the part no one talks about. Sometimes loving yourself means accepting that love might take longer to find you, or worse, that it might not come at all. And that's a scary thought because I don't want much. I don't want perfection. I don't want fantasy. I just want someone who stays, someone who doesn't get overwhelmed by sincerity, someone who doesn't confuse depth with pressure. But the longer time passes, the quieter that hope gets. Not gone, just tired. I don't hate love. I don't resent it. I'm just starting to wonder if it has a place for me, and if it doesn't, I guess I'll have to learn how to live a full life without it. Not because I stopped believing, but because believing started to hurt more than letting go. It's not even the loneliness that gets me anymore, it's the pattern. How people come into my life with energy and leave with excuses. How they swear they like me, but never enough to stay consistent. Never enough to choose me when it's not convenient. Never enough to make me feel secure. And I'm tired of hearing the same lines in different voices. I'm not ready. I'm focusing on myself. You deserve better. And maybe I do. But why does better never turn into someone who stays? At some point you stop feeling unlucky and start feeling singled out. Like love has an address, and somehow it keeps getting my name wrong. I watch people get loved loudly, chosen publicly, protected without asking, and me? I get almost commitment, almost consistency, almost somebody's favorite, and that almost does something to you. It makes you question your personality, your looks, your worth, your timing. Like if you could just fix one thing, love would finally land. But then the quiet truth hits. Love isn't avoiding me because I'm impossible to love. It's avoiding me because I don't accept half love anymore. And that scares people because I don't want casual comfort. I want real intention. I want someone who doesn't disappear when it gets deep. Someone who doesn't treat effort like a favor. Someone who doesn't love me in waves. And if that kind of love doesn't exist for me, then I guess the hardest thing I'll ever do is stop waiting for it to show up. Not because I'm bitter, because I'm tired. After a while, you stop getting excited when someone new shows up. Not because you don't want love, but because you don't trust it to stay. So you hold back without meaning to. You don't open all the way. You don't imagine futures anymore. You don't let yourself get attached too fast, because every time you did before, it ended the same way. Distance, silence, someone slowly pulling away while pretending nothing changed. So now you detach early. Not out of coldness, out of self-defense. You start preparing for the ending before the beginning even settles. You keep one foot out the door because history taught you that staying hopeful hurts more. And the worst part, people feel that. They sense your hesitation, your guardedness, your quiet expectation that this won't last, and they match it. They don't go all in, they don't invest deeply, they keep things light, flexible, undefined, which only confirms what you already believed. Love doesn't choose you fully, so the cycle repeats. You expect love to leave. Love senses you're bracing, no one commits, everyone walks away, and you're left wondering if love avoids you, or if you've learned not to trust it enough to let it stay. That's the cruel part. You didn't become distant because you don't care. You became distant because you cared, and it kept costing you. So now you protect yourself by expecting less, and every time love passes you by, it reinforces the same quiet thought. Maybe love isn't meant to find me. Maybe it's meant to pass through. Eventually, hope stops hurting loudly. It just fades. You don't cry about love anymore. You don't rant about it. You don't even talk about it much. You just stop expecting it. You start telling yourself that maybe love is for other people. People who are easier, people who don't feel as deeply, people who fit better into how relationships work now. And that belief settles in quietly. You still show up. You still try when someone new comes around. But there's a ceiling now. You don't let yourself dream past the present. You don't imagine forever. You don't let excitement get too loud. Because disappointment trained you. You learned that getting your hopes up only makes the fall harder. So you keep them low, manageable, contained. People think you're calm. They think you're chill. They think you're emotionally mature. But really you're just tired of believing in something that keeps proving you wrong. You start romanticizing independence, telling yourself you don't need love anyway, that you're better off alone, that attachment is overrated, and maybe part of that is true. But another part of you still aches when you see people chosen easily, loved openly, protected without asking. You don't envy them. You just wonder why it never seems to be you. And the scariest thought creeps in, what if this isn't a phase? What if this isn't healing? What if this is just acceptance? Acceptance that love won't find you no matter how patient you are, no matter how much you grow, no matter how carefully you love. So you make peace with the idea that maybe love isn't your story, and that peace feels less like relief and more like surrender. At some point, you stop chasing love altogether. Not in a dramatic, I'm done with love way, but in a quiet, tired way. You stop looking for it in rooms, stop expecting it in conversations, stop wondering if this person might finally be different. You still show up, you still talk, you still connect, but the hunger is gone. Not because you're fulfilled, but because you're exhausted. You've wanted love for so long that wanting it started to feel embarrassing, like asking for something that clearly wasn't meant to be yours. So you replace longing with numbness. You tell yourself you're fine, that you don't need anyone, that independence is better anyway. And some days you believe it, but other days it feels like you've just buried something alive. You don't get butterflies anymore. You don't get excited about potential. You don't let yourself feel anticipation, because anticipation has disappointed you too many times. People mistake this version of you for healed. They say you're strong. They say you're grounded. They say you've matured. But what they don't see is how much of that softness you had to shut down to survive. You didn't stop wanting love because you outgrew it. You stopped because wanting it started to hurt too much. And now you're in this strange in-between place. Not heartbroken, not hopeful, just waiting without believing. And the thought that scares you the most isn't being alone. I was wondering if you've waited so long that even if love did find you now, you wouldn't know how to let it in. Sometimes the thought hits you that maybe love did try to find you before, and that's harder to sit with than believing it never came at all, because then you have to ask yourself if you were too hurt to see it, too guarded to trust it, too used to disappointment to believe something good could last. You replay moments differently now. People who tried to get close, but you kept at arm's length. Connections you didn't fully invest in because you were already bracing for the end. Not because they were bad, but because you were tired. Tired of hoping, tired of opening up, tired of being the one who cared more. So you stayed cautious, you stayed reserved, you stayed prepared to lose, and maybe that protection kept you safe, but it also kept you distant. That realization stings because it means love wasn't always the one that failed to show up. Sometimes it showed up quietly and you were too wounded to let it stay. But even knowing that, you don't blame yourself. You were doing what you knew how to do to survive repeated disappointment. You weren't cold, you weren't careless, you were scared. Scared to believe again and have it fall apart like it always did. So you chose control over vulnerability, distance over hope, certainty over possibility. And now you're left wondering if love will ever feel safe enough again to recognize when it's real. That question lingers, not loudly, not urgently, just quietly in the back of your mind. At some point, fear quietly replaces hope, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly. You stop expecting good things to last. You stop trusting excitement. You stop letting yourself believe that something real could finally choose you. So you protect your heart. At first, it feels smart, responsible, like growth. You don't overshare. You don't get attached too fast. You don't let people see how much you care. But over time, protection turns into distance. You're not just guarding against pain anymore. You're guarding against connection. You start filtering yourself, keeping conversations surface level, holding back emotions before they even have a chance to exist. And people feel that. They don't push deeper. They don't try harder. They assume you're not that interested, which feeds the same belief again. Love doesn't choose you. But what's really happening is that fear is deciding for you. Fear is telling you it's safer not to hope, safer not to want too much, safer not to open the door all the way. Because every time you opened it before, something left. So now you keep it cracked, just enough to say you tried, never enough to risk getting hurt again. And that's the quiet tragedy of it. You didn't stop believing in love because you don't care. You stopped because caring started to feel dangerous. And the longer fear sits in the driver's seat, the harder it becomes to remember what hope even felt like. Eventually you start telling yourself you're better off alone. Not because you don't want love, but because wanting it feels pointless. You say things like, I'm used to being by myself, I don't need anyone, I'm fine the way I am. And part of that is true, you're strong on your own. You have learned how to survive without being chosen. You can build a life that doesn't depend on someone staying. But there's another part you don't talk about, the part that still wants to be seen, the part that still wants someone to stay without being asked, the part that wonders what it would feel like to finally be someone's first choice. So you compromise with yourself. You don't hope, but you don't fully let go either. You live in this middle space where love is something other people get, and you quietly prepare for a life without it. You stop imagining shared futures. You stop picturing growing old with someone. You plan your life around independence because that's the only constant you trust. And people admire you for it. They call you self-sufficient. They say you're unbothered. They think you're healed. But healing isn't supposed to feel like convincing yourself you don't want something you still ache for. You didn't choose solitude because it fulfilled you. You chose it because disappointment taught you not to expect more. And the scariest part, the longer you live like this, the more normal it feels. Love stops feeling like something missing and starts feeling like something unrealistic. And that's when you wonder if love didn't avoid you at all. If you just slowly stop believing you were allowed to have it. The truth is, you never stopped wanting love. You just stopped admitting it. You tell yourself you're fine alone, that you've outgrown the need for romance, that you're focused on yourself now. But late at night, when everything's quiet, that truth shows up. You still imagine being chosen, still wonder what it would feel like to be someone's safe place, still crave a love that doesn't hesitate. You just don't say it out loud anymore. Because admitting you still want love feels dangerous. It feels like setting yourself up for disappointment again. Like reopening a door you worked so hard to close, so you downplay it, you joke about it, you bury it under independence and self-control. But wanting love never made you weak. Being hurt just taught you to hide that want better. You learned how to survive without being chosen. But survival was never the same as fulfillment, and deep down you know the difference. You didn't stop believing in love because you healed. You stopped because believing started to feel like self-betrayal. Like hoping for something that never came was making a fool of you. So you chose silence instead. But that silence doesn't mean you're done wanting love. It just means you're tired of wanting it alone. At some point, you have to face the question you've been avoiding this whole time. Is love really done with you, or are you done believing in it? Because the truth is, love didn't disappear overnight. It faded every time you were disappointed, every time someone almost chose you, every time you opened up and watched it fall apart again. Eventually, believing started to feel stupid, like hoping for something that clearly wasn't meant for you. So you stopped. Not because you stopped wanting love, but because you couldn't handle wanting it alone anymore. You told yourself this is just how life turned out, that some people get love and others learn how to live without it, and maybe that belief protected you. It kept you from more heartbreak, more waiting, more letting yourself down, but it also cost you something. It cost you the ability to imagine a future that includes being chosen. It cost you the courage to believe something good could stay. So now you stand here, not hopeless, not hopeful, just tired of wondering, tired of preparing for disappointment, tired of asking why love keeps missing you. And maybe the hardest truth is this: love didn't stop trying to find you. You just stopped leaving the door open, not because you're broken, not because you're unlovable, but because getting your hopes up hurt more than letting them go. And whether love ever finds you or not, one thing is clear now. You didn't lose because you loved too much. You lost because loving started to feel unsafe. So if love ever does come again, it won't be loud, it won't rush you, it won't demand you believe right away. It'll wait, and the real question won't be whether love finds you. It'll be whether you're willing to believe again when it does. I've been thinking about something lately. There's a difference between being loved and being convenient, and sometimes I can't tell which one I am. Because you say you love me, you act like you care, you stay, but staying isn't the same as investing. You can stay in someone's life because they're easy, because they're understanding, because they don't cause too many problems, because they don't threaten your comfort. That doesn't automatically mean you love them deeply. And that's where my mind starts wandering. If I stopped being easy, if I stopped being patient, if I stopped adjusting when you're distant, if I stopped giving you the benefit of the doubt every time something feels off, would you still love me the same? Or would things start feeling heavier to you? Because I love in a way that's active. I think about you when you're not around. I consider how my actions affect you. I replay conversations to make sure I didn't hurt you unintentionally. I check in even when I'm tired. And I don't do that to be praised. I do that because I care, so when I don't feel that same level of intentionality back, it doesn't make me angry. It makes me unsure, because love shouldn't feel like something one person maintains. It shouldn't feel like if I stopped trying, everything would slowly collapse. Sometimes I wonder if you love the way I show up for you, but not the actual weight of loving me back, because loving me means consistency. It means emotional awareness. It means showing up even when you're stressed. It means reassuring without being asked 5 times. And I don't know if you're loving me or just enjoying how I love you. And that difference matters more than people think. Because I don't want to be someone's peace if I'm not also their priority. I don't want to be someone's stability if I'm not also deeply valued. I don't want to be easy to keep just because I'm hard to lose. I want to feel chosen loudly enough that I don't question it silently. And lately, I've been questioning it. I think what makes this question uncomfortable is that nothing is technically wrong. You're not cruel, you're not distant all the time, you're not openly careless. But love isn't just about what someone isn't doing. It's about what they are doing consistently. And sometimes I feel like I'm filling in emotional gaps you don't even notice are there. When I feel tension, I address it. When I sense distance, I close it. When communication weakens, I strengthen it. But when I pull back slightly, even a little, I can feel the difference immediately, and that tells me something. Because if the connection shifts the moment I stop overcompensating, then maybe I've been holding more weight than I realized. And that's exhausting. Not physically, emotionally. Because loving someone deeply while wondering if they love you with the same intentionality creates a quiet insecurity you don't talk about out loud. You start asking yourself subtle questions. If I didn't initiate, would they? If I didn't reassure, would they? If I didn't bring warmth into the conversation, would it still feel warm? And I don't want to think like that. I don't want to calculate effort. I don't want to measure energy. But imbalance forces you to notice patterns, and patterns don't lie. There's also a difference between being wanted and being valued. Wanted is temporary, wanted is emotional in the moment, valued is consistent. Valued means you're considered in decisions. Valued means your feelings are handled carefully. Valued means someone protects the connection, even when things feel stable. Sometimes I feel wanted, but I don't always feel protected. And protection doesn't mean control. It means awareness. It means someone thinking, I don't want to lose this, so I'll handle it with care. I want to feel like that. I don't want to be someone you assume will always stay. I want to be someone you actively choose to keep, because there's a dangerous comfort in knowing someone is loyal. It can make you relax too much. It can make you stop trying as hard. It can make you think effort isn't urgent anymore. But love without continued effort slowly turns into maintenance, and maintenance feels transactional. I don't want to be loved because I'm stable. I don't want to be loved because I'm understanding. I don't want to be loved because I don't make things difficult. I want to be loved because I matter, because my presence is important to you, because losing me would actually affect you, not just inconvenience you. And if I ever have to question that for too long, then something isn't landing the way love should. Because when you're deeply loved, you don't feel like you're the only one holding the emotional glue together. You feel supported, you feel met, you feel secure enough to stop asking whether you're too much. And until I feel that consistently, not just in moments, not just after I express doubt, that question will keep circling in my mind. Do you love me, or do you just like having me around? There's something I haven't said out loud. I think I'm afraid of being loved comfortably. Not passionately, not intentionally, comfortably. Comfortable love is quiet. It assumes I'll always be there. It stops checking as much. It stops pursuing as much. It stops protecting the connection as carefully. And it doesn't look toxic. It just slowly feels less alive, less intentional. Because in the beginning, you pay attention to everything. You notice small mood changes. You ask deeper questions. You show up with energy. But once things feel secure, once I've proven I'm loyal, once you feel like I'm not going anywhere, do you still put in that same care? Or do you relax into the assumption that I'll always adjust? Because here's the truth, I do adjust. I understand when you're tired, I understand when you're stressed, I understand when you need space, but understanding shouldn't mean I absorb everything. It shouldn't mean I silently carry the emotional difference. And sometimes I feel like I do. Sometimes I feel like I love you in ways that require awareness, and you love me in ways that require comfort. There's a difference. Awareness asks, how does this affect them? Comfort asks, they'll understand. And I always do. But at what cost? Because when you're the emotionally steady one, the patient one, the consistent one, people forget you still need reassurance too. They forget you still need to feel chosen. They forget that even the calmest person can start questioning things if effort shifts. And I've felt shifts, not dramatic ones, small ones, less curiosity, less intentional communication, less urgency to fix small disconnects. And when small disconnects aren't addressed, they grow, not into explosions, into distance. And distance is quiet, it doesn't scream. It settles. It makes you feel slightly alone even when someone is right there. That's the part that scares me, not losing you. Feeling alone while still having you. Because if I'm going to love someone deeply, I don't want to feel like I'm maintaining it by myself. I don't want to feel like my emotional awareness is what keeps us stable. I want to feel met. I want to feel like if I pull back slightly, you lean in. I want to feel like if I'm overwhelmed, you step up. I want to feel like if I go quiet, you notice without me announcing it. That's love, not just staying, not just saying it, but actively participating in it. And until I feel that consistently, not just when I bring it up, not just after conflict, not just when I look distant, that question will sit with me. Are you loving me deeply, or just loving the fact that I make things easy? I think the hardest truth I'm slowly accepting is this. If I have to constantly question the depth of your love, then something about it doesn't feel secure. And love without security becomes anxiety. Not loud anxiety, quiet anxiety. The kind where I replay conversations in my head, the kind where I overanalyze tone, the kind where I wonder if I'm asking for too much just because I want consistency. And I don't want to be that version of myself. I don't want to love guarded. I don't want to measure how much I give. I don't want to calculate who initiates more. I don't want to mentally track effort just to reassure myself that things are balanced, because love shouldn't feel like an equation. It shouldn't feel like if I relax, everything will slowly fall apart. It should feel shared, protected from both sides, maintained by both people. There's a difference between being loved and being relied on. Being relied on means you're useful. Being loved means you're valued. Being relied on means you bring stability. Being loved means someone protects your emotional stability too. Being relied on feels good at first. It feels important, but over time, if if it's not matched with intentional care, it starts to feel heavy, because I don't want to be the emotional backbone of something without feeling emotionally supported myself. And here's the part that really matters. If I stopped being the easy one, if I stopped being the understanding one, if I stopped smoothing over tension before it grows, if I stopped filling emotional gaps without mentioning them, would you step up? Would you fight for it the same way? Would you lean in instead of leaning back? Or would things slowly drift because I'm no longer overcompensating? That question tells me everything, because real love doesn't depend on one person's emotional maturity to survive. Real love meets you halfway. It notices your silence. It responds to your distance with concern, not ego. It protects your heart even when you're not actively asking for protection. And I don't want dramatic love. I don't want obsessive love. I don't want love that feels like chaos. I want love that feels intentional. I want to feel chosen without begging for it. I want to feel prioritized without competing for it. I want to feel secure without constantly seeking proof. Because if you truly love me deeply, I won't feel like I'm guessing. I won't feel like I'm trying to convince myself. I won't feel like I'm the one holding the emotional glue together. I'll feel it in your consistency, in your effort after comfort sets in your willingness to maintain what we have instead of assuming it will maintain itself. And maybe you do love me, but if I constantly feel like I'm the one protecting the connection, then it's not balanced. And love without balance eventually becomes exhaustion. So the real question isn't just, do you love me? It's this: if I stop making it easy to love me, would you still love me the same? Or have I just been convenient all along? There's something about half-secure love that changes you slowly, not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. You stop asking for reassurance because you don't want to seem needy. You stop bringing up small things because you don't want to create tension. You start telling yourself it's not that serious, even when it is. And little by little, you become smaller inside the relationship, not because you're weak, because you're trying to protect it. But protection shouldn't only come from one side. I shouldn't feel like I'm constantly managing the emotional temperature. I shouldn't feel like I'm the one making sure things don't drift, because when you love someone deeply, you don't just assume they'll stay. You actively maintain the connection. You don't just rely on their loyalty. You honor it. And sometimes I wonder if you've gotten used to me, used to my patience, used to my consistency, used to the fact that I rarely overreact. And being used to is dangerous, because comfort without effort turns into complacency, and complacency slowly turns into distance. And distance is what makes someone start asking questions they never wanted to ask. I don't need to be chased every day, but I do need to feel chosen every day. There's a difference. Chasing is about excitement. Choosing is about intention. Choosing means you still show effort after the honeymoon phase fades. Choosing means you still check in emotionally even when nothing is wrong. Choosing means you don't let comfort replace care. And that's what I crave. Not intensity, not drama, not chaos disguised as passion. I want steady love, the kind where I don't have to analyze tone, the kind where I don't feel like I'm overthinking every small shift, the kind where my nervous system isn't constantly scanning for changes. Because when love feels secure, your body relaxes. You don't brace for distance. You don't anticipate inconsistency. You don't question whether you matter that day. And lately I've caught myself bracing. That's what scares me. I've realized something about myself. When I start questioning whether I'm loved, I don't get loud. I get quiet. I observe more. I speak less. I test nothing, but I notice everything. I notice if you initiate. I notice if you reassure without being prompted. I notice if your effort stays steady or fluctuates. And if it fluctuates too much, I don't argue. I slowly detach, not because I want to, but because protecting my heart becomes instinct, and once I start detaching, it's hard to reverse. Because detachment doesn't come from anger, it comes from exhaustion, from feeling like you've been carrying something emotionally alone for too long. And I don't want to detach from you, I want to feel secure with you, but security requires reciprocity. I think what hurts most is the possibility that you love me in your own way, but not in the way I need. And love isn't just about what you feel internally, it's about how it translates externally. If your love makes me feel unsure, if your love makes me feel like I'm asking for too much when I ask for consistency, if your love makes me feel like I have to shrink to keep the peace, then something isn't aligning, because real love doesn't make you question your value. It reinforces it. It doesn't make you wonder if you're too emotional. It makes you feel safe expressing emotion. And I don't want to be in a position where I'm constantly explaining why I need reassurance. I want it to feel natural, mutual, balanced. Here's the truth I don't say out loud. I don't want to compete with your comfort. I don't want to fight against your laziness. I don't want to beg for effort that should come naturally when someone truly values you. Because if you deeply loved me, you wouldn't want to risk losing me through neglect. You wouldn't let small disconnects grow. You wouldn't assume I'll always stay no matter what. You would treat the connection like it matters, not just when things feel unstable, but especially when things feel secure. Because secure love still requires maintenance, it still requires intention, it still requires showing up fully. And if I ever feel like I'm the only one doing that consistently, that's when love starts feeling heavy instead of safe. So do you love me? Or do you just like having me? Because those two things look similar at first, but over time, they feel very different. Liking having me means you enjoy my presence. Loving me means you protect it. Liking having me means you're comfortable. Loving me means you're intentional. Liking having me means you assume I'll stay. Loving me means you make sure I want to, and I don't want to stay somewhere I feel half secure. I don't want to slowly shrink just to keep something alive. I don't want to love loudly while feeling loved quietly. I want balance. I want mutual effort. I want to feel so consistently chosen that I stop asking myself this question entirely, because when you are deeply loved, you don't sit alone wondering. You feel it in the way they show up every day, not perfectly, but intentionally. And if I ever have to keep convincing myself that I'm loved, then maybe I'm not asking for too much. Maybe I'm just ready for a love that makes the answer obvious. No isn't the worst thing a girl can say, but the worst thing a girl could do is to pretend to like you or love you, get you attached, treat you like her boyfriend, and tell you she's not ready for a relationship. Shawty just played you like she's playing Animal Crossing. If there was an Olympic sport for getting played, best believe you would have gotten a gold or bronze medal. Y'all didn't even get past the talking stage. She dragged it out like this was 13 Reasons Why. If this was me, finding her would be as easy as trying to find the one piece. This type of disrespect is something you can't tolerate. The woman species now makes your blood boil. Talking to girls romantically is something you don't even want to hear about. This is the type of pain and heartbreak that will have you up at 3 a.m. doing 3 sets of 20 push-ups while thinking of ways to change your life around. This is the type of pain that makes you want to get rich and conquer the world. After this type of foolery, she might have turned you nonchalant. Now every girl you meet after her suffers. It's like she broke the way you loved and trusted. This is honestly most of us guys' lore. A lot of us aren't born nonchalant. It's usually someone who makes us feel that we need to be this way to protect ourselves from the way we were once hurt. This is why I always say don't give away your love and your heart too soon. Then it could all be a game of poker, and these girls are waiting for you to show your hand so they can crush you and take you for everything you have. After that kind of situation, you don't just move on like nothing happened. People act like you can just charge it to the game, but that game took something from you. It took the version of you that believed words matched actions. It took the version of you that assumed consistency meant interest, that effort meant intention. And once that's gone, it doesn't come back easily. You start noticing the shift in yourself. You don't text first as much anymore. You hesitate before opening up. Compliments feel suspicious. Affection feels temporary. You're no longer asking, do I like her? You're asking, is this even real? And and that question follows you into every new connection, even with people who haven't done anything wrong. That's the unfair part. One person plays with your feelings, and suddenly everyone after them has to deal with the damage. You become guarded, distant, almost emotionally lazy, not because you don't care, but because caring once cost you too much. You learn that giving your heart too early can turn into a lesson you never asked for. And late at night, that's when it really hits. When the distractions are gone, when you're alone with your thoughts, that's when the anger shows up, not just at her, but at yourself, for ignoring the red flags, for believing potential instead of patterns, for staying, and deep down something felt off. That anger fuels change, but it can also harden you if you're not careful. A lot of guys turn that pain into motivation. Gym sessions at ungodly hours, obsessing over goals, wanting to level up in every area of life. And while growth is good, it's important to recognize where it's coming from. Are you improving because you want more for yourself? Because you're trying to prove you were worth choosing? That experience becomes part of your story, your lore, not to victimize you, but to explain why you move the way you do now, why you don't fall as fast, why you keep your guard up, why you test people before trusting them. You weren't born this way. Someone taught you to protect yourself, and the real lesson isn't to stop loving. It's to stop giving your heart to people who haven't earned access to it yet. What really messes with you is realizing she probably didn't think it was that deep. To her, it was just talking, just vibes, just something to pass the time. But to you, it was hope. It was imagination. It was planning things in your head you never even said out loud. And that imbalance is where the damage happens. One person is casually passing time, the other is slowly building attachment. You replay moments looking for answers. The good mornings, the late replies that still felt warm, the way she acted like she cared without ever committing to it, and you start asking yourself if you imagined it all, if you read too much into things, if you're the problem for feeling deeply in a world where people stay shallow on purpose. That's when trust starts cracking, not just trust in others, but trust in yourself. You stop believing your intuition because last time it led you straight into disappointment. So now you second guess everything. Is she flirting or just being nice? Does she actually like me or just like the attention? You become hyper aware, constantly scanning for signs that history is about to repeat itself. And the worst part is how it rewires your expectations. You go into new situations already bracing for impact, already assuming it won't last, already preparing for the moment they pull back and say they're not ready. So instead of enjoying the present, you're always waiting for the drop, always half gone even when you're still there. This is how people become emotionally unavailable without meaning to, not because they don't want love, but because love once felt like a setup, like something that was offered just to be taken away. So you start protecting yourself in quiet ways. You don't get excited too fast, you don't express how much you care. You keep things surface level until someone proves they're different. But here's the truth, nobody tells you. What happened to you wasn't weakness. It was sincerity meeting someone who didn't know what they wanted. And that doesn't mean you should stop being sincere. It just means you have to be more selective with who you give that version of yourself to. After that kind of situation, something shifts in you. You're not loud about it, you don't announce it, but you feel it in the way you move. You stop leading with your heart and start leading with caution. You don't text first as much. You don't double text. You don't let yourself get excited over potential anymore. You tell yourself it's maturity, but deep down, it's fear wearing a calmer face. You start believing that caring less is safer, that being detached is smarter, that if you never let anyone get too close, they can't pull the rug from under you again. So you keep people at arm's length, you flirt without intention, you talk without expectation, you convince yourself this is control, but really it's armor. And sometimes you miss the old you, the version of you that loved freely, that didn't overthink every reply, that didn't feel embarrassed for being excited about someone. You miss how deeply you used to feel before it backfired. You don't know how to go back without risking the same pain again. That's how one situation can bleed into every future one. You start punishing people who haven't done anything wrong yet, not intentionally but subconsciously. You assume they'll leave, assume they'll switch up, assume they'll say they're not ready once you get attached, so you stay one step ahead emotionally, just in case. And the scary part is how normalized this becomes. People praise you for being nonchalant, for not caring too much, for being unbothered. They don't see the nights you still replay things in your head. They don't see how guarded you've become. They don't see how badly you still want something real, even though you act like you don't. But here's the part you need to hear. Becoming colder isn't healing, it's surviving. And survival is not the same as growth. You didn't lose because you cared. You lost because you cared about someone who wasn't capable of matching it. One day, someone will come into your life and your walls will confuse them. They'll feel the distance, they'll wonder why you hesitate, and you'll have to decide whether you're going to keep letting the past decide how you love, or whether you're ready to risk feeling again, this time with someone who actually means it. Here's the truth nobody really prepares you for. The hardest part isn't getting played, it's what happens after when you meet someone new who actually treats you right, and you don't know how to receive it. Their consistency feels suspicious. Their interest feels too good to be true. When they text back fast instead of feeling secure, your mind starts asking, what's the catch? Because your brain remembers patterns, remembers how attention turned into attachment, and attachment turned into disappointment. So now every good thing feels temporary. You don't relax into love anymore, you brace for impact. You're always waiting for the switch up, the moment they pull away, the moment they say they're not ready, the moment you realize you were just another phase to them. And it's exhausting, because part of you wants to love again the way you used to. Fully, honestly, without holding back. But another part of you is screaming not to, telling you that being vulnerable is dangerous, that letting someone see you is how you get hurt, so you stay halfway in, halfway out. Enough to not be alone, but not enough to be devastated again. That's why you start confusing peace with boredom. Healthy love feels quiet compared to chaos. There's no guessing games, no mixed signals, no emotional roller coaster. And because you got used to inconsistency, stability feels unfamiliar, almost wrong. You catch yourself thinking, why isn't this hurting? Why am I not anxious? And that's when you realize how much damage was done. But healing doesn't mean you'll never be cautious again. It means learning when caution is protecting you and when it's sabotaging something good. It means unlearning the belief that love has to hurt to be real. It means reminding yourself that not everyone is playing a game, even if someone once did. You're not broken for being guarded, you're human. You adapted. Don't let one person's inability to love you properly rewrite who you are at your core. Because the version of you that loved deeply wasn't weak. That version was brave. And one day when it's safe again, you'll recognize that feeling and you'll know it's finally real. What nobody tells you is that after being hurt like that, you don't become heartless overnight. You become careful. You start analyzing everything, tone, timing, energy. You replay conversations in your head, not because you're obsessed, but because you're trying to protect yourself from ever feeling that stupid again. You promise yourself you'll never miss the signs next time. So when someone new comes around, you don't jump in, you test the waters, you pull back just to see if they'll step forward. You stop texting first, not because you don't care, but because you're scared of caring more again. You don't want to be the only one invested, you don't want to be the one waiting ever again. And sometimes that defense mechanism costs you something real. The person in front of you isn't the one who hurt you. They're not playing games, they're not keeping you around for attention. They're just trying to get to know you, but your heart doesn't know the difference yet. It's still in survival mode. You might even catch yourself pushing them away emotionally, acting distant, acting unbothered, acting like you don't care as much as you actually do, because caring openly once led to pain, and you don't want to relive that lesson. You tell yourself you're just being smart now, more mature, more controlled. Deep down, there's a part of you that misses loving without fear, and that's the conflict. You want connection, but you don't want to bleed for it. You want intimacy, but only if it doesn't cost you your peace. So you move slow, you keep walls up, you tell yourself if it's meant to be, they'll stay. And if they leave, at least you didn't give them everything. Just know this. Healing isn't about rushing back into who you were before. It's about choosing who you want to be now. Someone wiser, someone more aware, but still open, still capable of real love. Because the goal was never to become cold, it was to stop giving your warmth to people who couldn't handle it. Here's the truth. Most people never say out loud. Becoming guarded doesn't mean you lost your ability to love. It means you finally learned your worth. There's a difference. You didn't harden because you're bitter. You hardened because you had to survive something that broke you when you were genuine. You remember how freely you used to give, how you didn't hesitate, how you showed up with your whole chest. No hesitation, no backup plan. You didn't measure effort, you didn't keep score, you just loved. And when that got taken advantage of, it didn't just hurt your heart, it shook your identity, it made you question if being that open was a mistake. So now you hesitate. You don't open up right away, you don't trauma dump, you don't promise things too early. You don't let people know how deeply you feel until they've proven they're safe. And that's not weakness, that's discernment, that's growth. But sometimes people misunderstand that version of you. They call you distant, nonchalant, emotionless. They don't see the emotional discipline it took to become this way. They don't see the nights you had to teach yourself how to let go, how to sit with silence, how to stop chasing explanations that were never coming. And yeah, it gets lonely sometimes because not everyone has the patience to get past your walls. Not everyone understands that consistency matters more to you now than words. That effort means more than promises. That actions are the only language you really trust. The right person won't rush you. They won't demand access to parts of you they haven't earned. They won't punish you for protecting yourself. They'll understand that loving you means moving at your pace, showing up even when you don't ask, being steady when you're cautious. You're not broken. You're recalibrated. You didn't lose your softness. You just learned to aim it better. And one day, when someone proves they can handle your heart without hurting it, you'll feel it, because you'll want to open up again. Not out of fear of losing them, but because it finally feels safe to stay. What people don't realize is that the walls you built weren't meant to keep love out. They were meant to keep the wrong people from walking in and wrecking everything again. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be distant. You became distant after explaining yourself one too many times to people who never listened, after forgiving things you never should have had to forgive, after loving someone who treated your heart like something disposable. There was a version of you that believed effort would always be met halfway, that if you just loved harder, communicated better, stayed patient longer, things would work out. And when that belief collapsed, it didn't collapse quietly. It shattered because you weren't just mourning a person, you were mourning the version of yourself that thought love was always safe. So now you watch patterns, you notice energy shifts, you pay attention to how people show up when it's inconvenient, not when it's easy. You don't get attached to potential anymore. You don't romanticize promises. You wait to see if words and actions line up, and if they don't, you detach without explaining yourself the way you used to. Some people call that cold, but it's not. It's clarity. You're tired of giving the benefit of the doubt to people who already showed you who they were. You're tired of staying loyal to people who only kept you around when it benefited them. You're tired of feeling stupid for caring too much, so you stopped overextending. You stopped proving. You stopped begging to be chosen. And yeah, sometimes you miss how deeply you used to feel. Sometimes you miss how excited you got, how hopeful you were. But you also remember the crash, the nights you questioned your worth, the way your chest felt heavy for weeks, the way you blamed yourself for someone else's inability to love you properly. That's why you don't rush now. That's why you don't fall fast. That's why you protect your peace like it's sacred, because you know what it costs to rebuild yourself from emotional ruins. And the truth is, the right person won't see your caution as a flaw. They'll see it as proof that you value yourself. They'll be patient enough to earn your trust, consistent enough to soften your guard, safe enough to remind you that not everyone comes to take. You're not afraid of love, you're afraid of losing yourself again. And that fear makes sense. Here's the part nobody tells you when you go through something like that. The fact that you're guarded now doesn't mean you're broken. It means you survived, it means you learned, it means you finally stopped pouring yourself into people who treated your heart like something they could pick up and put down whenever they felt like it. You didn't lose your ability to love. You just stopped giving it to people who didn't know how to hold it. Deep down, that soft version of you still exists. The one who loves deeply, the one who shows up, the one who means what they say and stays when things get uncomfortable. You didn't kill that part of yourself. You just hid it, locked it away until someone proves they're safe enough to see it again. And that's growth, because love isn't about giving everything immediately anymore. It's about watching how someone treats your time, your effort, your vulnerability. It's about noticing if they stay consistent when there's nothing to gain, if they choose you when it's inconvenient, if they respect your boundaries instead of testing how far they can push them. You're not asking for perfection now. You're asking for honesty, for effort that doesn't disappear, for reassurance that doesn't feel forced, for a connection that doesn't make you feel anxious, confused, or small. And the right person won't make you feel like you have to guard yourself forever. They won't rush you. They won't pressure you to open up faster than you're ready. They'll understand why you hesitate, why you question, why you move slower than before, because they won't see your past as baggage. They'll see it as context. One day, someone will come into your life, and instead of triggering your fears, they'll quiet them. Instead of making you overthink, they'll bring peace. Instead of making you feel like you have to protect yourself, they'll make you feel protected. Until then, it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away faster. It's okay to protect your heart. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You're just done bleeding for people who never planned to stay. And when love comes again, it won't break you, because this time, you know your worth. Sometimes I don't question whether I love people. I know I do. I love intentionally. I love in details. I love in the quiet ways that don't always get noticed. I remember the small things you said 3 months ago. I notice when your voice sounds slightly different. I pay attention to your moods without you having to explain them. If you're overwhelmed, I adjust. If you're distant, I check in. If you're hurting, I feel it too. So when I sit alone and that thought creeps in, am I actually loved the same way? It doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from imbalance, because loving someone isn't hard for me, but feeling consistently loved back, that's where it gets complicated. There's a difference between being wanted and being valued, between being chosen and being considered, between someone enjoying your presence and someone protecting your heart. And sometimes I can't tell which one I am. Am I loved, or am I just convenient? Am I loved, or am I just consistent? Am I loved, or am I just the safe option, the stable one, the reliable one, the one who won't leave easily? Because people say I love you all the time, but love isn't proven in the words, it's proven in patterns. Do you show up the same way on random days, not just when you're lonely? Do you care about my emotions when they're inconvenient? Do you notice when I go quiet, or do you only feel my absence when I stop giving? That's the part nobody talks about. You can be in a relationship, you can be talking every day. You can be physically close and still feel emotionally unsure, still feel like you're giving more than you're receiving, still feel like if you stop trying so hard, everything would fall apart. And if that's true, is that love? Or is that maintenance? I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need over-the-top affection. I don't need dramatic gestures. But I need to feel secure. I need to feel like I matter when I'm not performing strength. I need to feel like I'm loved even on the days I'm quiet, tired, distant, not at my best. Because real love doesn't just enjoy you when you're easy. It stays steady when you're human. And I think that's what scares me, the possibility that I'm loved for what I provide, not for who I am, loved for my stability, loved for my patience, loved for my understanding, but not deeply studied, not emotionally prioritized, not carefully handled. And if I'm being honest, I don't want half love. I don't want to be someone's comfort without being their commitment. I don't want to be someone's peace without being their priority. So yeah, sometimes I sit with that quiet question. Am I actually loved, or am I just really good at loving others? The hardest part about questioning love is that it doesn't always come from obvious neglect, doesn't always come from cheating or lying or someone clearly mistreating you. Sometimes it comes from subtle absence, from emotional gaps you can't quite explain, from feeling like you're standing next to someone but not fully with them. Because love isn't just about presence, it's about engagement. It's about whether someone studies you the way you study them. I ask myself things like, if I stopped initiating, how long would it take for them to notice? If I didn't send the good morning text, would they send one first? If I went quiet for a few days, would they check in because they care or because they're bored? And I hate that those thoughts even exist, because when love feels secure, you don't test it in your head, you don't calculate effort, you don't keep mental score, you just exist inside it peacefully. But when love feels uneven, your brain starts tracking patterns. Who apologizes first? Who makes more time? Who adjusts more? And that's when the doubt begins. Not loud doubt, quiet doubt. The kind that sits in your chest at night. The kind that makes you reread conversations. The kind that makes you wonder if you're asking for too much or just asking the wrong person. I don't want dramatic love. I don't want obsession. I don't want someone who can't function without me. I want someone who chooses me consciously, daily, not because I'm easy, not because I'm stable, not because I don't cause problems, but because they genuinely value me, because they care about my internal world, because they don't want to risk losing me through laziness or emotional distance. That's the difference. You can love someone and still be careless. You can love someone and still take them for granted. You can love someone and still assume they'll never leave. But being loved properly, that feels intentional. It feels protected. It feels like someone is actively maintaining the connection, not just enjoying it. And sometimes I wonder, if I pulled my energy back to neutral, if I stopped overcompensating, if I loved at the same level I was receiving, would it still feel strong? Or would would everything start crumbling? Because if my effort is what's holding us up, that's not love, that's imbalance disguised as loyalty, and I don't want to resent someone for something I never addressed, but I also don't want to keep shrinking just to avoid conflict. I want to feel wanted loudly enough that I don't question it silently. I want to feel secure enough that I don't rehearse conversations in my head. I want to feel chosen in a way that removes doubt instead of feeding it, because love shouldn't feel like something you constantly measure. It should feel like something you rest inside, and until I can sit in it, without wondering if I matter the same way, I think that question will always echo softly. Am I actually loved, or am I just deeply loving? I think what makes this question heavy is that I don't doubt your feelings. I doubt your effort because feelings are invisible. Effort isn't. You can tell me you love me, you can say it in the right tone, you can even mean it. But love that isn't maintained eventually feels like memory, and I don't want to live off potential. I don't want to survive off they care, they're just bad at showing it, because if I can show it, if I can adjust, if I can communicate clearly, why does it feel like I'm the one stretching more? That's where the exhaustion comes in, not from loving you, from overcompensating for the space you leave. There's a specific loneliness that comes when you're the emotionally aware one, when you're the one who brings things up calmly, when you're the one who says, let's talk about it, when you're the one who makes sure small issues don't become big ones. And sometimes I wonder, if I stopped being that person, would you step into that role? Or would we slowly drift because I stopped carrying the emotional weight? That's not partnership, that's imbalance. And imbalance slowly turns love into doubt. I don't need perfection, I need reciprocity. I need to feel like if I fall apart, you won't just watch. I need to feel like if I go quiet, you'll notice. I need to feel like if I stop being strong for a moment, you won't become distant. Because love isn't just about who stays when it's easy. It's about who leans in when things feel uncomfortable. And sometimes I don't feel leaned into, I feel leaned on. And there's a difference. I don't want to be your emotional safety net without you being mine. I don't want to be the consistent one while wondering if I'm consistently valued. And maybe you do love me, but if I constantly have to question it, then something about the way it's being expressed isn't landing. Because real love doesn't eliminate all fear, but it does eliminate constant uncertainty. It doesn't make you feel like you're negotiating your worth. It makes you feel secure enough to stop asking yourself if you matter. And until I can sit in this without quietly measuring effort, without wondering if I'm too much, without shrinking my needs to maintain peace, that question will stay in the back of my mind. Am I actually loved, or am I just deeply convenient? I think the real fear isn't that you don't love me, it's that you love me comfortably. There's a difference. Comfortable love is quiet. It assumes. It relaxes a little too much. It stops trying as hard because it believes I'm not going anywhere. And maybe I won't, but that doesn't mean I don't notice the shift. In the beginning, effort feels automatic. You call just to hear my voice. You ask questions and actually wait for the answers. You care about how my day went, not just what happened. But once things feel stable, do you still pursue me? Do you still choose me loudly? Do you still protect the connection like it could be lost? Or do you just exist in it? Because love that stops being intentional slowly starts feeling optional. And I don't want to feel optional in someone's life. I don't want to be the person you assume will always understand, the person you assume won't leave, the person you assume doesn't need reassurance, because the strong ones still need softness, the independent ones still need consistency, the calm ones still need effort, and sometimes I think people forget that. They mistake my patience for infinite tolerance. They mistake my understanding for emotional immunity. They mistake my loyalty for permanence. But even loyal people get tired. Even understanding people feel hurt. Even calm people question things when the effort changes. I don't want to be loved lazily. I don't want to be loved based on convenience. I want to be loved actively. I want someone who doesn't just assume I know they care, but make sure I feel it. Someone who doesn't just stay, but stays with intention. Because here's the truth, if I ever stopped trying the way I do now, would you fight for this the same way? If I ever pulled my energy back to neutral, would you step up or would you get distant? That question alone tells me a lot. Love shouldn't feel like something I'm maintaining by myself. It shouldn't feel like if I relax for a second, everything will slowly fade. It should feel mutual, balanced, protected from both sides. And until I feel that consistently, not just in moments, not just after conflict, not just when I express doubt, that quiet thought will linger. Am I loved deeply or just comfortably? Maybe the hardest part about all of this is that I don't want to accuse you. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I don't want to seem insecure. I don't want to turn something small into something heavy. But silence builds pressure, and pressure turns into quiet resentment, because when I feel like I'm giving more than I'm receiving, I don't explode, I adjust. I overthink, I analyze, I start loving more carefully, and that's when something shifts inside me. I stop being soft in the same way, I stop opening up as freely, I stop expressing needs because I don't want to feel like a burden. And you probably wouldn't even notice at first, because I don't change loudly, I change subtly. And that's the scary part, because once I start protecting myself emotionally, I don't fully come back the same. I don't want to have to guard my heart with someone who says they love me. I don't want to measure my words. I don't want to calculate how much reassurance I can ask for without seeming too much. I want to exist freely. But freedom only comes when love feels secure, not intense, not obsessive, secure. The kind of secure where I don't have to question your effort after a disagreement. The kind of secure where your consistency doesn't depend on my mood. The kind of secure where I don't feel like I have to earn softness from you. Because love shouldn't feel conditional. It shouldn't spike when I'm easy to love and dip when I need extra understanding. And sometimes I ask myself something deeper. If I disappeared tomorrow, would you miss me because you love me? Or because you lost something that benefited you? Would you miss my heart? Or just my stability? Would you miss the way I cared, or just the fact that I cared consistently? That difference matters more than people realize, because I don't want to be someone's comfort zone if I'm not also their conscious choice. I don't want to be someone's safe option if I'm not also their priority. And I don't want to keep pouring into something where I feel like I'm the emotional backbone. Love should feel like two people holding it up, not one person carrying it quietly. And until I feel that weight shared, I'll keep asking myself softly, am I actually loved, or am I just deeply dependable? I think what I've realized is this: if I constantly have to ask myself whether I'm loved, then something inside me doesn't feel safe, because real love doesn't require constant decoding. It doesn't make you sit alone at night replaying conversations. It doesn't make you question your worth after small disagreements. It doesn't make you shrink just to maintain peace. Real love feels steady, not perfect, not dramatic, steady. It feels like someone who chooses you, even when you're not at your best. It feels like someone who reassures without being forced. It feels like someone who protects your heart, like it's their responsibility too. And maybe you do love me, but if your love makes me anxious, if it makes me overanalyze, if it makes me feel like I'm asking for too much when I ask for consistency, then it's not landing the way love should, because love shouldn't make you question your value. It should reinforce it. It shouldn't make you feel like you're lucky to be chosen. It should make you feel mutually chosen. Maybe the real shift isn't asking, am I actually loved? Maybe it's asking, do I feel secure here? Do I feel prioritized? Do I feel emotionally safe? Because love isn't just something someone says. It's something you experience repeatedly. It's in the tone, the effort, the consistency after comfort sets in, the way someone handles you when you're difficult, not just when you're easy. And if I'm honest, I don't want intense love. I don't want dramatic love. I don't want love that feels like a roller coaster. I want love that makes me stop asking this question entirely. Love that's so clear, so intentional, so consistent that doubt doesn't have room to grow. Because if I'm constantly wondering whether I'm loved, then maybe I'm not asking for too much. Maybe I just haven't experienced love that makes the answer obvious. And when I do, I won't have to ask, I'll know. Don't waste your teenage years obsessing over love. It's easy to fall into that trap. You watch movies, shows, social media, high school sweethearts, perfect relationships, young love that looks magical from the outside, so you start thinking you need that too. Like, if you don't experience love early, you're missing out on something important, so you chase it. You talk to people just to not be alone. You stay in situations that don't feel right just so you can say you're with someone. You keep trying to make things work that clearly aren't working, and slowly, without realizing it, it starts tearing you down. Your confidence drops, your sense of self gets blurry, you stop knowing who you are outside of liking someone or wanting to be liked back. Your mood depends on replies, attention, validation, and that's dangerous at that age. When you're young, you're not supposed to have everything figured out. You're supposed to be discovering who you are, what you like, what you stand for, what kind of person you want to become. But when all your energy goes into chasing relationships, you neglect that part of yourself. You start building your identity around other people instead of building it from within. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most teenage relationships don't last, not because you did something wrong, not because love isn't real, but because you're both still growing, still changing, still figuring life out. And forcing love before you even know yourself is like trying to build something on an unstable foundation. It cracks every time. If something isn't flowing naturally, stop forcing it. Love isn't supposed to feel like constant stress, chasing, or proving your worth. If it's meant to happen, it won't require you to lose yourself to keep it. And the thing nobody wants to hear? Desperation pushes people away. Confidence attracts them. When you stop hunting for love and start working on yourself, things shift. You become more grounded, more secure, more you. And that's when real connections show up naturally. You still have so much life ahead of you, so much fun to have, so many experiences that don't revolve around relationships. Don't let anxiety over love rob you of your youth. Love will come, but it shouldn't come at the cost of who you are. Right now, the most important relationship you can build is the one with yourself. Here's what happens when you slow down and stop chasing love so hard. You start hearing yourself again, your own thoughts, your own wants. You realize how much noise you were living with, always wondering if someone liked you back, always questioning where you stood, always trying to be enough for someone who barely knew who they were either. When you're young, your heart is open, but your identity is still forming. That's a dangerous mix. You attach quickly because you don't yet have roots in yourself. So when something ends, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire sense of worth. You don't just lose a person, you lose who you thought you were with them. That's why breakups feel world-ending at that age. Not because the love was deeper, but because you were still becoming you. And every time something falls apart, you start questioning yourself instead of realizing it was just part of growth. When you step back from chasing relationships, you give yourself room to breathe. Room to build confidence that isn't dependent on attention. Room to develop interests, skills, goals. Room to fail at things that don't involve your heart breaking. And those failures, they teach you way more than forcing a relationship ever could. You also learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That's huge, because once you can enjoy your own company, you stop settling for people who treat you like an option. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing mixed signals. You start choosing peace over drama, and the wild part is, once you stop looking desperate for love, you become more attractive without trying, not because you change your appearance, but because you carry yourself differently. You're not reaching for validation anymore, you're grounded, you're present, you're whole on your own. Love hits different when it finds you like that. when it comes from alignment instead of need, when it adds to your life instead of becoming your life. So don't rush it, don't force it, don't let relationships define you before you even know yourself. There's no prize for loving early, but there is power in loving wisely. Here's what happens when you slow down and stop chasing love so hard. You start hearing yourself again, your own thoughts, your own wants. You realize how much noise you were living with, always wondering if someone liked you back, always questioning where you stood, always trying to be enough for someone who barely knew who they were either. When you're young, your heart is open, but your identity is still forming. That's a dangerous mix. You attach quickly because you don't yet have roots in yourself. So when something ends, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire sense of worth. You don't just lose a person, you lose who you thought you were with them. That's why breakups feel world-ending at that age. Not because the love was deeper, but because you were still becoming you. And every time something falls apart, you start questioning yourself instead of realizing it was just part of growth. When you step back from chasing relationships, you give yourself room to breathe, room to build confidence that isn't dependent on attention, room to develop interests, skills, goals, room to fail at things that don't involve your heart breaking. And those failures, they teach you way more than forcing a relationship ever could. You also learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That's huge, because once you can enjoy your own company, you stop settling for people who treat you like an option. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing mixed signals. You start choosing peace over drama. And the wild part is, once you stop looking desperate for love, you become more attractive without trying. Not because you changed your appearance, but because you carry yourself differently. You're not reaching for validation anymore. You're grounded, you're present, you're whole on your own. Love hits different when it finds you like that, when it comes from alignment instead of need, when it adds to your life instead of becoming your life. So don't rush it, don't force it, don't let relationships define you before you even know yourself. There's no prize for loving early, but there is power in loving wisely. The truth is, love isn't something you're late to. There's no deadline where if you don't find it by a certain age you've failed. That pressure is made up. It comes from comparison, from watching other people's highlights and assuming they're ahead of you. But everyone's path is different, and forcing yourself to keep up only makes you miss what's right in front of you. When you focus on yourself first, something happens. You stop romanticizing every connection. You stop projecting futures onto people who haven't even earned a place in your present. You start asking better questions, not just, do they like me? Do I even like how I feel around? That shift changes everything. You realize that love shouldn't drain you. It shouldn't make you anxious all the time. It shouldn't make you abandon your goals, your friendships, or your sense of direction. Real love fits into your life. It doesn't consume it. And you can't recognize that until you've spent time building a life you actually care about. This is also when you learn patience. Not the kind where you wait around hoping someone chooses you, but the kind where you trust that what's meant for you won't require you to chase it down. You stop running toward people and start walking toward yourself. And ironically, that's when people start noticing you more. Because confidence isn't loud. It's calm. It's knowing you're okay whether someone stays or goes. It's choosing people who choose you back without hesitation. And that kind of energy doesn't come from trying to be loved. It comes from being at peace with who you are. So don't rush love. Don't let loneliness make your decisions. Don't let movies or social media convince you you're behind. You're not behind. You're building. And when love does show up, real love, you'll be ready for it, not desperate for it. One day you'll look back and realize how important this time was. Not because of who you dated or didn't date, but because of who you became when no one was choosing you romantically. These are the years where you learn discipline, where you learn how to sit with discomfort instead of running to someone to distract you from it, where you learn how to build something that lasts longer than a temporary connection. When you stop making love the center of your world, you start seeing everything else clearly. Your friendships get stronger, your goals feel more meaningful, Your confidence comes from progress, not attention, and you realize how dangerous it is to let someone else be the source of your happiness before you even know how to create it yourself. This is also when you start setting standards instead of expectations. Expectations are hoping someone becomes what you want. Standards are knowing what you will and won't accept. And standards only come from self-respect. You don't develop that by chasing validation. You develop it by choosing yourself consistently. There's a version of you that exists when you're not worried about being loved. That version is focused, curious, hungry for growth. That version doesn't beg to be chosen because he knows his value isn't determined by who stays. And that's the version of you that real love is actually drawn to. So let love be something that complements your life, not something that defines. Let relationships come from alignment, not loneliness. And trust that when the timing is right, when you're solid in who you are, love won't feel like something you have to chase. It'll feel like something that finally makes sense. You're not missing out, you're preparing. What people don't talk about enough is how much damage comes from learning love the wrong way too early. When you grow up thinking love is supposed to be chaotic, unstable, and uncertain, you carry that blueprint into adulthood. You start associating butterflies with anxiety. You mistake emotional inconsistency for passion, and you end up chasing people who mirror the same confusion you never heal. That's why taking time for yourself isn't selfish. It's preventative. It teaches you how to recognize healthy connection when it finally appears, because healthy love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't feel like you're constantly auditioning to be chosen. When you build yourself first, you stop trying to earn love. You expect it to be mutual. You expect effort to be consistent. You expect respect to be automatic. And if it's not there, you walk away without turning it into a personal failure. You also learn how to love without losing yourself. You keep your routines, your goals, your sense of direction. Love becomes something that adds warmth to your life, not something that replaces, and that balance is something you can only learn when you've spent time standing on your own. The biggest mistake isn't being alone when you're young. The mistake is tying your self-worth to relationships before you understand who you are without. You don't need someone to complete you. You need to complete yourself enough that love becomes a choice, not a necessity. So let yourself grow. Let yourself evolve without pressure. Let love meet you when you're ready to share your life, not escape, because the strongest love stories don't start with desperation. They start with self-respect. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize how quiet confidence actually feels. It's not loud, it's not flexing, it's not proving anything to anyone, it's waking up knowing, even if no one texts you today, you're still okay, that your life still has direction, that your worth didn't disappear because someone didn't choose you. That's the version of you love is meant to meet. When you're young, it's easy to think love will save you, that once you find the right person, everything else will fall into place. But real growth teaches you the opposite. You build the life first, you build stability, purpose, discipline, and self-respect. And then love fits into that life naturally, instead of becoming the thing you rely on to feel whole. This is why rushing relationships too early can stunt you. You start making decisions based on fear of losing someone instead of what's best for your future. You compromise your goal. You stay small to keep someone comfortable, and you don't even realize it's happening until you look back and feel behind. Taking time for yourself isn't missing. It's an investment. Every day you spend learning who you are, strengthening your mind, improving your habits, and building something meaningful is setting you up for a healthier connection later. One where love doesn't feel like pressure, but partnership. And when that love finally comes, you won't feel like you're holding your breath. You won't feel anxious or unsure. You'll feel steady, chosen, at peace. That's how you'll know you didn't rush. One day, love will find you when you're not looking for. not because you gave up on it, but because you stopped needing it to validate you. You'll meet someone when you're comfortable in your own skin, when your life already has meaning, and when you're not trying to fill a void with another person. And when that happens, it won't feel like chaos, it won't feel like chasing or guessing or proving. It'll feel natural, balanced, safe, like two people choosing each other, not out of loneliness, but out of intention. You'll be glad you didn't rush. You'll be grateful for the nights you spent alone building yourself instead of forcing something that would have only distracted. You'll realize that the love you were searching for externally was something you were always meant to cultivate internally first. So if you're young and feeling behind, if you're single and feeling pressured, breathe. If you're watching everyone else pair up and wondering when it'll be your turn, trust the timing. Love isn't a race. And your life isn't measured by who you dated in your teens. Protect your peace, build your... Enjoy being young. The rest will... I don't think I ever wanted too much. I didn't need perfection. I didn't need constant attention. I didn't need someone to save me. I just wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone who noticed when I went quiet. Someone who checked in without being asked. Someone who didn't treat my presence like something optional. But every time I tried to explain that, it sounded like neediness, like I was asking for too much. So I stayed quiet, I accepted less. I told myself I was independent enough to not need reassurance, but deep down that wasn't true. I wasn't asking to be obsessed over. I wasn't asking to be put on a pedestal. I was asking to matter, to feel like my absence would be noticed, like my feelings would be considered, like I didn't have to earn basic care by being easy, understanding, or low maintenance. And every time I didn't get that, I told myself it was fine, that this is just how people are, that expecting care is unrealistic, that I should be grateful for whatever effort showed up, but wanting to be cared for doesn't make you weak. It means you're human. It means you want a connection where effort is mutual and presence isn't forced. And the hardest part is realizing how long you stayed in places where you felt invisible just because you didn't want to seem like you needed too much. I didn't want someone to fix me. I just wanted someone who cared enough to stay aware of me. At some point, wanting to be cared for turns into accepting the bare minimum. You stop asking questions, stop expressing needs, stop pointing out what hurts. Because every time you do, it feels like you're asking for too much. So you adjust, you get excited over replies that should be normal, you appreciate effort that should be consistent, you thank people for things they do effortlessly if they truly cared, and you tell yourself this is just how love works. But deep down you feel it, the imbalance, the quiet disappointment, the way you're always the one paying attention. You're not asking for grand gestures, you're asking for awareness, to be checked on, to be considered, to feel like your emotions aren't an inconvenience, but instead you keep shrinking your expectations to fit what people are willing to give. You call it being low maintenance, being understanding, being independent, when really you're just afraid that if you ask for more, you'll lose what little you have. And that's the part that hurts, because you don't want more love, you just want the love that's already there to show up consistently. You don't want to beg for care, you want it to be natural. And the longer you settle, the more you start questioning yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I needy? Am I wrong for wanting this? But wanting to be cared for was never the problem. Staying where you're barely noticed is. Pretending you don't need care slowly disconnects you from yourself. You start ignoring your own feelings before anyone else can. You tell yourself you're fine even when you're not. You swallow disappointment and call it maturity, because admitting you want care feels risky. It feels like giving someone power to decide whether you're too much, so you choose silence instead. You become the easy one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't ask for reassurance or consistency or emotional presence. And people like that version of you because it asks for nothing, but inside something starts to dull. You feel lonely even when you're not alone. You feel unseen even when someone's there. You start questioning whether your needs are even valid anymore. That's when you know you've gone too far. Not by wanting care, but by convincing yourself you don't deserve it. You weren't meant to love people from a distance. You weren't meant to be strong at the cost of being felt. Care isn't weakness. Wanting it isn't dependency. It's connection. And the moment you deny yourself that truth, you don't just lose it from others, you lose it from yourself. There's a moment where it finally hits you. You've been caring for everyone else while no one was really caring for you. You remember how often you checked in, how often you noticed shifts in tone, how often you adjusted yourself to make things easier for others, and then you look back and realize how rarely anyone did that for you. No one asked if you were okay when you went quiet. No one noticed when your energy changed. No one slowed down enough to really see you. And that realization hurts in a quiet, heavy way because you weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking to be prioritized above everything. You were asking for reciprocity. To feel like your presence mattered as much as you made theirs matter. That's when the exhaustion sets in. Not physical tiredness, Ambrosios, emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from always being the one who cares first, who understands more, who gives grace even when it costs you. You start wondering how you became so good at holding space for people who never learned how to hold it for you. And the truth is uncomfortable. You taught them it was okay to lean on you without leaning back, to receive care without returning it, not because you wanted imbalance, but because you didn't want to feel abandoned. And realizing that is both painful and clarifying because it shows you something important. You weren't asking for too much, you were just asking it from the wrong people. That realization changes how you choose people. You stop being impressed by words. You stop getting attached to potential. You stop mistaking attention for care because now you know the difference. Care looks like consistency. It looks like remembering. It looks like showing up even when it's not convenient. So you start paying attention to who checks in without being prompted, who notices when you're off, who doesn't make you explain why you need what you need. And at first that makes your circle smaller. You walk away from people you once would have stayed for. You stop overextending. You stop being the only one holding things together. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally care about yourself too. You don't chase care now. You don't hint at it. You don't downplay your needs to make someone comfortable. You let people show you how they show up. And if they don't, you don't argue with it. You don't try to teach them how to care. You accept the information and move accordingly because wanting to be cared for isn't a flaw, it's a boundary. And the moment you start honoring it, you realize something important. You'd rather be alone than be surrounded and still feel unseen. Choosing yourself feels lonely at first, not because you made the wrong choice, but because you stopped filling the silence with people who never really saw you. You notice the absence quickly, the lack of constant conversation, the quiet that comes when you're no longer overgiving just to stay connected. And that quiet can be uncomfortable because for a long time, being needed made you feel valued. Being available made you feel important. Being the one who cared most made you feel like you belonged. Now you don't do that anymore. You don't reach out first every time. You don't check in when it's never returned. You don't hold space for people who won't hold it for you. And yes, that leaves gaps, but those gaps feel different than the loneliness you had before. Before you were lonely even when surrounded by people. Now you're alone but at peace. There's no resentment building, no quiet disappointment, no wondering why you're not enough. Just space to breathe, space to feel what you feel, space to rebuild a relationship with yourself that isn't based on neglect. You start realizing that loneliness with self-respect is lighter than connection without care. And once you taste that peace, it's hard to go back because you finally understand Being cared for starts with not abandoning yourself anymore. Learning how to receive care is harder than giving it. That part surprised me. I was always good at showing up, at checking in, at being thoughtful without being asked. But when someone tried to do that for me, I didn't know how to relax into it. I questioned it. I downplayed it. I felt uncomfortable being the one who was noticed, because for so long, care felt conditional, like something you earned by being useful, easy, understanding. So when someone offers it freely, without you proving anything, your first instinct is to brace yourself. You wait for it to disappear, you look for the catch, you assume it won't last, and that's not because you don't want care, it's because you're not used to it being consistent. You're used to being the giver, the supporter, the one who adapts. So receiving feels vulnerable in a way giving never did. It means letting someone see you without performing, letting yourself need without apologizing, letting care exist without questioning your worthiness of it. That takes unlearning. Takes time to believe that you don't have to exhaust yourself to deserve tenderness. And I'm still learning that, still reminding myself that care doesn't have to be chased, earned, or negotiated. Sometimes it's just there, and allowing it in is the bravest thing you can do after spending so long surviving without it. At some point, you stop asking why people don't care. You stop replaying conversations, stop analyzing tone, stop wondering what you could have done differently, because that question only keeps you stuck chasing explanations instead of truth. So you ask a different question: who actually shows up for me? Not who says they care, not who means well, not who shows interest when it's easy, but who checks in consistently, who notices when you're quiet, who doesn't disappear when you need space or reassurance or time. And the answer is usually smaller than you expect: fewer people, less noise, more clarity. That realization hurts, but it also simplifies everything. You stop pouring into people who only take. You stop investing in connections that leave you feeling unseen. You don't make announcements, you don't explain your shift, you just move differently. You protect your energy. You reserve your care for those who return it naturally. And slowly you stop feeling desperate to be noticed, because you're no longer surrounding yourself with people who make you feel invisible. Care stops being something you beg for and starts being something you recognize. And that's when you finally understand being cared for isn't about convincing people to treat you better. It's about choosing the ones who already do. Wanting to be cared for doesn't make you needy. It makes you honest. Needy is asking someone to fill a void they didn't create. Needy is expecting one person to carry everything for you. But wanting care, that's wanting reciprocity. That's wanting your effort to be met, your presence to be valued, your emotions to be considered. You're not asking someone to revolve their life around you. You're asking them to see you. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that asking for that was too much. So you minimized yourself. You softened your needs. You told yourself independence meant not needing anything from anyone. But that wasn't strength. That was self-denial, because even the strongest people need to feel cared for sometimes, need to feel noticed, need to feel like their existence matters to someone else. You don't want care because you can't survive without it. You want it because connection is part of being human. And the moment you stop shaming yourself for wanting that, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop pretending you're okay with being overlooked. You stop accepting crumbs just to feel included. You realize something important. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong people. At the end of all this, I realized something simple. Wanting to be cared for is not something I negotiate anymore. I'm done explaining why it matters, done justifying why I feel hurt, done shrinking my needs so someone else can stay comfortable. Care is not a bonus, it's not extra, it's not something you earn by being quiet, easy, or low maintenance. It's the baseline. If someone doesn't notice me, doesn't check in, doesn't consider how their actions affect me, then they don't get access to me. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, out of self-respect. I spent too long convincing myself that wanting care made me weak, too long accepting half presence and calling it connection, too long staying where I felt invisible, just to avoid being alone. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need to be chased. I don't need to be obsessed over. I just need to be considered. And if someone can't do that naturally, without me begging, hinting, or explaining, then they're not my person. Because the right people won't make you feel guilty for wanting to matter. They won't make care feel conditional. They won't make you question whether you're asking for too much. They'll just show up. And until that happens, I'd rather stand alone with my needs intact than sit beside someone who makes me feel unseen. I didn't want too much. I just wanted to be cared for. And now I care enough about myself to never accept less again.